The order, please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Marty, please.
Mary Jo Rosmanowski.
Here.
Mary Jo Radcliffe. Here. Tom Epps.
Here.
Troy Webb.
Here.
Amy Hoffman. Here. Ann Deemer. Here. Brad Dobbs.
Here.
And has the meeting been noticed according to public open meeting laws?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'd like to take time to recognize Amy Hoffman for her last meeting with us. She's had lots of years of service to our district, and we just thank you for your professional work and your communication and all of your years with.
So this is Amy's third 3-year term serving on the board.
9 years.
And
yes.
she has always brought such unique thinking and analytical mind, and you are such a great communicator. We're going to miss you a great deal. So thank you so much.
Go out with it.
Would you like to say anything?
Sure. I've enjoyed my time on the board. I've appreciated it very much. I had been reflecting on the 9 years a little bit, and when I began my first term, it was just as Act 10 was ramping up and all heated and everything, and now I'm ending it with COVID and many other things as well. So I'm bookended by lots of interesting times. Yeah, and you know, people often say it's a thankless job, but I can honestly say I have not felt that way. It's been a great experience, and I've learned a lot. I think I came into it with preconceived ideas, but it does help to be involved and to learn what's going on and how everything just gets done.
Excellent. And so with your bookends of some pretty dramatic events, remember you were also part of successfully overhauling all of our facilities, right? That also happened during your 9 years, and lots of other great work. So thank you so much for your business.
Lots of celebrations. Thank you. Thank you. Let's give her another round.
We'll have gifts and grants for next.
All right, so the high school music department, as many know, are taking their trip down to Florida this spring, and so they are looking for creative ways to fundraise to help offset some of the costs for the students. And so they asked some of our local professional organizations to sponsor a song for their Pops concert. And so the BRF Rotary Club, WWIS Radio, and WHTL Radio were all willing to make a financial donation to help offset the student costs on that trip to Florida in the name of sponsoring a song for their Pops concert. So we would like to recognize them and share our appreciation with them.
Are there any questions? Make a motion to accept the gifts and grants as presented.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Opposed? Yeah, that's very good. Now we're at public comment, and we have 2 comments about 8.4, and I'd like to invite Dr. Severson to just share a communication first.
Sure. So I just wanted to talk a little bit. 8.4 is our policy committee reporting out, and so just so everyone is on the same page here tonight, policy committee agenda was posted on April 4th, and I'm guessing the topic that many of you are here to talk about was also on that agenda for April 4th. Recently, I just received this communication that I'd like to share out with you because, to be honest, some of these words are awful threatening and absolutely not based on fact. And so I would just like to share this out and then give you the district perspective. The board will absolutely listen to your public comment, not trying to stop any of that. I just want people to know who received this communication that I can't imagine what it's based on. So it says, BRF people, the school board and district wants to implement a gender identity policy. And I'm going to pause there. We are not bringing this forward as a policy. Right now, there is no legislation to support policy one way or the other, and so we brought it to the policy committee knowing that it was going to be a pretty intense discussion for our community to have, and so wanted to have a lot of opportunity to talk about it and what we can do with students and families before we're recommending any policy. You would have no way of knowing that because it was on the policy agenda and then coming here tonight, but I just want to be very clear. We're not bringing it forward as policy. We're bringing it forward as a plan to work with parents and students about. So I just wanted to pause there. It said they intended to punish any staff or students who do not comply. I can't fathom where that came from, because to be honest, the entire plan, the very top of the plan says school staff, caregivers, and the student will work together to complete the document. So the document is created in partnership with students and families. I have no idea where any conversation about punishment came from. Certainly not from us. It says the district is also wanting to silence the public input and to hide lesson plans and curriculum. Again, it was publicly posted on April 4th. It was publicly posted again 2 weeks ago in the newspaper. So the need for this, I'm going to call it inflammatory language, a couple hours ago, I don't really understand that. But I just want to be really clear about where this came from. Look at the photos below. If you care about your children in the future of our district, please come to the meeting tonight. Absolutely. If you care about your students, please get involved in whatever way feels best to you. I just wanted to be really clear that I don't understand punishment. I don't understand that. And the whole thing talks about being done in partnership with the family and the student. This was brought forth by the middle school, and the board will listen to your public comment, and then I'm going to call on Mr. Nortman to talk a little bit about how it's working at the middle school, and to share that at the policy committee, Mr. Epps and Mrs. Deemer were at that meeting. The middle school counselor was there to talk about it a little bit as well. So I just wanted to preface the discussion with that before we went into public comment. So hopefully take a breath and recognize that we are certainly not trying to be secretive in any way. It's been publicly posted 2 separate times, meant for very open dialogue.
Where did you find, where was that?
A staff member forwarded it to me, so it was posted on the Jackson County for Education.
Okay, who's first for public comment?
Betsy Settlebauer is here to talk about 8.4.
All right, Betsy Settlebauer, I'm a parent, I'm a taxpayer. First, I would like to thank Brad Dobbs for identifying that board members need to be held accountable how they spend taxpayer dollars at the February and March meetings. Thank you for acknowledging that the only acceptable board members are those that agree with the administration and school board president's view, no matter what, and not represent the oath they took to follow the U.S. Constitution, the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin, or even listening to community members. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, that intimidation and bullying tactics are not right for students. Then why is it tolerated and promoted by the Board of Education towards people who do not agree with them? You, the board, have now set the standard that at any time, at any meeting, if a board member does not do what they are told, they need to reimburse the taxpayer dollar. You should begin to work on a policy for this, since there is no policy. We have 2 board members and a superintendent who have served over 10 years, have gone to numerous conferences and seminars. And what is to show for it? A declining district. In the bottom 5% of all districts in Wisconsin, maybe they should reimburse the taxpayer, since that's the board's position now. Let's see how the district uses our money. Superintendent Severson went to Nashville to the Schools Superintendents Association annual conference this past February, where equity was the main focus. Numerous speakers and bloggers for the conference have said it is our responsibility, the superintendents in the schools, to fight for what is right for kids. You're not only wrong in this, you're dead wrong. That is not your job. It is the job of the parents to fight for their kids, not you. These children do not belong to you. They are given by God to their parents. Your job is to teach the kids writing, reading, math, science, and history, period. You can't even accomplish that. As I pointed out above, your leadership has led us into the bottom 5% of districts in Wisconsin. But maybe, as Mr. Dobbs said in February, conferences are justifications on the taxpayer dime. One more thing. If you are using our tax dollars to send staff, school board members, and administration team to learn how to keep parents' voices silent and to assist in the destructive behavior of students forcing gender identity and pronouns, that needs to stop. The things going on out of the public view and out of the committee members' view is wrong. If you continue down this destructive path, then at least put it in writing that you will be responsible for any future physical and mental health problems this will cause students. If you are serious about this path you want to take, put it in writing, put it out in the public eye. And if you continue down this path, we will be forced to do a forensic audit by a committee, and we will be exposing your tactics. You will not get to our children. For the families listening in, this is happening in our district. There has been punishment of students in this past fall, especially. For the staff members that know this is wrong, it's time to stand up and say enough. It's past time to get our district back on track.
Next, Marty, which,
Patricia Pop from Rockaway would like to also talk about 8.4.
Hi, I'm Patricia Pop. I'm a taxpayer and a grandmother of a soon-to-be in first grade boy. And I came to talk about gender identity. And God created us male and female. There are two genders. I'm asking with all my heart that we don't teach other genders in school. The kids, they're going to learn it on the street if they have to. My kids grew up in this school, and I have a daughter who has my 13-year-old granddaughter. At the age of 13, decided that she is a boy. She was mad about her change of life. So my daughter, I don't know where she got it. She could have got it in school, she could have got it on the street, but I'm just here to try to advocate ahead of time, just in case there's any teaching going on about other than male and female in the school. So she was mad about her change of life. She decided she was a boy. She's been a boy for 2 years. She has since developed epilepsy. She's gained 100 pounds. And she's depressed. And I know that depression comes from lack of being who you are. And so I don't know where my daughter got it either, but she's allowing her to be a boy. I'm devastated. And at school, can we just teach them reading and writing and history and things that they need to learn so that they can grow up into a responsible adult, get a job? They don't need to learn 50 genders. And my grandchildren did tell me when they were 11, this is in a different district, that they learned that there were 50 different genders. I just don't think it's necessary in school. I mean, they really need to learn stuff that help their life, not stuff to destroy their life. So that's what I want to say. So thank you.
Thank you. And we have a student rep tonight for Student Senate President, Theda Del Cerro. Would you like to comment? From the student perspective.
Point of order, did she sign up for commentary or no?
So
She's a student, and she's
Right.
here.
but so
But our policy is, sorry, go ahead, Shelley.
I was going to say, if we wrap up the public comment, there was nobody else signed up. The next item was that we were moving the student senate, and I got to find who else was moving forward. Taylor Inches were moving forward was our next piece. So if those were the two public comments, and so I'd ask Theda, who's here as the student senate president?
So we're not going to discuss what we did public comment, because usually the process is we discuss it, right? And that's a standard operating procedure has been.
To discuss public comment? No, we are not.
Not discussing public comment, no. We discussed the item we bumped up, that's what you guys set the policy rules up. Would you please elaborate? Shelley would appreciate that.
You're on the right track.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
basically, that's what the rules have been
Theda
integrated
Del
to say.
Cerro will give her student senate report, and she would also like to comment on the 8.4 as well.
And so just point
Okay,
of
so
clarification,
a
just point of
motion-
clarification.
Okay, a
Yep.
motion has to be put forth to move Theda Del Cerro for her student senate report.
So if we could move 7.1 and field trip 7.2 up to,
I'm sorry, I forgot.
that's okay. If we could move, that's where you're headed, right? Move
Well, yeah,
those
that's how we do our rules over.
after 5.2.
So next will be Theda Del Cerro, please.
You gotta vote on
Somebody needs to
it.
make a motion, and then it needs
I
to.
move to move 7.1 and 7.2 to follow 5.2.
Thank you. Second. Thank you. Any comments or concerns about that?
Are we moving 8.4 as well up ahead? That's usually how we discussed it. That's been how we've operated in the past.
So when public comment has come
With
after, so
I mean,
what they
I can
usually
look
tell
at
us.
the rules, I guess.
With COVID, we did move the public comment because that's all that was. But then several meetings ago, we moved our.
I don't think that's what he's asking. So what has happened before, when people signed up for public comment, if there was an agenda item that came before it, we would make sure to move those agenda items later, so we could always hear public comment before the board discussed a topic. 8.4 is already well after public comment, so I'm not sure it needs to be moved. That is your decision to make. If somebody would like to make that motion to move that whole piece up, you certainly can do that.
I'd like to add, if we could
Add
discuss,
8.4.
if we could do 7.1, 7.2, 8.4. that'd be-
If we have a motion and a second and an addition, does anyone have any objection to moving the 8.4 discussion up? Okay, we have a motion and a second, 7.1, 7.2, and then 8.4. Any more comments? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Student safety report. Sorry, Lacey.
Would you like my public comment and then student senate?
So you may share your thoughts as a part of your student senate report is what you may do.
Okay. So this term, the Student Senate has been primarily focused on addressing students' needs and mental health. We've been collecting a lot of suggestions from the student body, and one thing that we've actually seen very often is the need for more gender education. We did work in a committee with members of the school board, members of the school faculty, and other students, and we decided that the best way to educate students on gender identity is to go over terms of vocabulary and express that they have someone to talk to if they need to talk to someone. I don't think, this is a personal tidbit, not a student senate president, but I don't think that it's bullying or punishment to educate students on the world as it evolves. Yes, we're teaching reading and writing, and we're teaching math, but we're also teaching students about the world as they're going into it. And whether or not Black River decides to change with the world, students need to be prepared to move out of the school that they are in, and they need to be ready for the world as it changes. And additionally, we put out a suggestion box for students to anonymously share their opinions, where we did receive that we needed more mental health education, and along with that, gender education. I've met with Mr. Mattson to discuss these suggestions, and we are currently working to assemble a panel of students to represent the student body at school board meetings and address ways to make this high school a more welcoming and safe space for everyone. Also, we're organizing a school-wide game of Assassin like we did last year to help make a more outgoing environment for students, and the game will double as a fundraiser for an undetermined charity organization to be voted on next week. This year has been a really productive year for the Senate, and we hope to accomplish as much as we can in the remaining weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
And so field trips was the next item move forward. You saw that there are two organizations that have students that first qualify or competed at the regional level and then the state level, and they've qualified for nationals, both in FCCLA and Skills USA, so the Family Consumer Science area and the Tech Ed area. And so they both organizations shared their travel information with us, and Taylor Inches is our middle school FCCLA advisor, and she volunteered to come and answer any questions that you may have about that. So would you like to just summarize briefly?
Sure. So my name is Taylor Inches. I teach middle school family consumer sciences, and I'm also the middle school family FCCLA advisor. We had an extremely successful showing at state for our district. We had 9 qualify for nationals. This is my first year, non-COVID year, of being in the world of FCCLA as an advisor, and I did it as a high schooler as well, and I got to experience it as a student. It was a lot more fun, I can tell you, to experience it as an advisor. It was a blast. We had a lot of great camaraderie. I think my favorite part as an advisor was watching our high school chapter kind of adopt our middle schoolers and watching them play that role. They joked that they did pick up and drop off for the middle schoolers to make sure they got exactly where they needed to be. As advisors, we have to do other things as well. So we're excited to have 9 qualifiers for nationals. Now that doesn't mean all 9 will go. It is quite an expensive trip if you look at it. Talking to other advisors in the area, one of the many hats I get to wear is also a travel agent. And so here I put together a spreadsheet of what it will look like potentially, potential pricing, and what our trip could look like. So we have to report to DPI in the next couple of days as to who will go. So we'll have to hear back from our students within the next couple of days. And this is what we sent home to parents and families last week. guess I'll just ask, do anyone have any questions for me?
Just as another aside, so the Skills USA Eli School, who has come to talk with all of you, he has one female and one male student that have qualified, and so he is reaching out to chapters around the state of advisors that he knows to see if there would be any way that the female could room with a trusted advisor and female student from another school to help curb the costs. And so I appreciate that they're trying to make it as affordable as possible. When I asked Sarah Halverson, who is the FCCLA director at the high school, she said that sometimes, Mr. Madsen, the high school has had a few end-of-year dollars that they can help to offset a small portion of the funds for our students, but the district does not budget for national competitions. It is typically on the students and family to determine, but they mentioned that the high school has at times been able to help with a small portion of it. So.
Yes, and then talking with other districts as well. So we've done a lot of fundraising ourselves, especially as a middle school chapter, and most of those funds then go towards state for us. We try to make that as affordable as possible because that's when we have the majority of our students travel. And as a middle school advisor, I want my kids to at least make sure we can get to state and then nationals, just above and beyond, obviously. And so most of our budgeting for what we fundraise for the year goes towards state. And then so, like Dr. Segerson said, the majority of nationals then falls on the families as their decision.
So you don't do any special fundraising for nationals?
We will, I just can't promise a certain dollar amount. And San Diego, when talking to other advisors, is the most expensive nationals destination. There are others coming up that would be less, but different years.
And how many middle school students?
I had 9 qualify from the middle school.
Wow.
First of all, congratulations. That's wonderful news, and thank you for your hard work on that.
Every student was really cool. Every student that made it to state from the middle school for competing in star events also qualified for nationals. So.
Do you have any guarantees on prices for flights?
Well, not until you book it, right? So when I was looking at flights, right now the cheapest would be to go out of Minneapolis down to Delta, and if you move one day or the other because you're competing with 4th of July coming in there, it like doubles in price. And it's quite the game, plane travel agent. Not my first time, but yeah. I wish I could say there's some guarantees, but not until you book the ticket, which is why we're asking families to make a decision fairly quick, so that we can try and keep it as low as possible. It sounds like a hard time, but
I know somebody that was just coming from Place to California, and it was $900. And there was no holiday involved in that.
I found $350. We're hoping Delta holds on for another couple days, but yeah, no, we'll see. That's our spreadsheet.
Well, thank you for all the information. Does anyone have any questions? Is there a motion to approve this?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I would just say I was glad to see at the Atlanta one that they have more security, because we see so much extra stuff going on in some of these cities that it, on a personal level, it's concerning to me, and I certainly adjusted my ideas of where I want to travel, so it concerned me to think of a bunch of our students being there. So to know that they had those protocols in place eased my mind a bit.
FCCLA does that as well.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to come, Taylor.
Next, we'll address the policy committee updates. The policy committee met, and these are first readings of policy changes, and then one, not a policy, but a plan.
So we can start right at the top. Mr. Epps and Ms. Deemer are also there if you have any thoughts. Oh, that's right, sorry. Just a note that the Human Growth and Development instruction, that change was just that committee that you guys worked on had suggested that the policy be reviewed every 3 years. So the policy has now been updated to state that it will be reviewed every 3 years, and it in addition to if there's any significant changes, so that if it's off the 3 years, that they still come back and review it. the Academic Excellence Higher Education Scholarship and the Technical Excellence Higher Education Scholarships. Those are just to take away the terminology of semester, because we're now in trimester. It's going to get a little bit hairy sometimes because they want to wait until after the second trimester before naming who those scholarship earners are. And our second trimester typically ends very early in March, and the state needs to know who those scholarship winners are very early in March. And so Libby Seacart, the high school counselor, looked forward the next year or two, and our end of trimester will still align so that they can clearly navigate that and get our people to make sure they're receiving those scholarship opportunities. The Families in Transition, that is a policy that Vicki Mikulski, our homeless liaison, has been working on. Perhaps you recall that we received a $30,000 homeless education grant, and it is based off of the McKinney-Vento Act, and this policy is one of the goals of the grant to make sure that we have policy that is updated and allows for all of the stipulations and the true definition of homeless and all of those pieces attached to it. And I would just say that she did a very thorough job. In addition to the policy, there's the rule, there's the exhibit, all of those things. I will tell you, 2 times this school year we found ourselves needing to refer to something like this, and here's that example. A student lives within our district, is attending our district. The family loses their secure housing and has to double up with somebody who lives outside of our district. According to the McKinney-Vento Act and this policy, they still are very welcome to attend their district of original origin of residence, and we have to work with the district that they live in to work together to create transportation. So the fact that a family has lost their permanent housing, we do not layer on the challenge of transportation on top of that. And so she did a nice job with the policy, the rule, the exhibit, all of that stuff for everyone to lean on. So that is there. And then was the gender support plan, and on the agenda it says not policy.
So before we dig into that,
Yeah.
I did have a question about the scholarship
Yes.
for the academic and then the tech one.
Mhm.
Is there a reason why the timing and the protocol of that was a little different from each other? It seemed like they weren't exactly the same, and I just wondered if there was a particular reason for it.
The technical college and the.
For the academic, the higher education scholarships, and then the technical excellence scholarship.
I'm wondering where they differ is what
I
I'm
think it
looking
was
for. I
in,
don't know off the top of my head.
if you'll scroll down just a little bit, Jill. I think it was the amount of time they had been here
Oh.
and the,
Sure. And so, long-standing in our academic excellence scholarship, so now we're in the cum laude system. Previously, this would have been the valedictorian, all of those
Right,
pieces.
right.
A student, this sounds silly, but a student cannot, so let's say there's 2 students that have been competing all the way through school to be the 4.0 valedictorian. They're in a neighboring district, and that other student is going to beat them. They could transfer in and try to get the
Yeah.
academic excellence. And I know it sounds far-fetched. It has happened, which is why there's rules about it. And so this is saying that you need, in order to be our academic excellence higher education scholarship earner, you have to have attended the previous school year here. So that sophomore year needs to be done here. The technical excellence, they're
Sophomore
actually
year or
earning,
junior year?
junior year,
Okay.
sorry, the year prior, I should have said.
Yeah.
The technical excellence scholarship, they're actually earning points towards that by the courses that they take.
Okay.
And so any courses that they take could bring them to that point up until the end of that senior year. So the idea is that students that are, so if they take them in their career pathway, if they take those are dual enrollment credits, all of those things get them points towards that technical excellence in the CTE areas, career technical education. So that one, it's not just about grade point, it's the actual classes that you take. And so they have that time to get there. Did that help?
I think so.
Okay.
And I actually comment on the same policy. So we use the term trimesters. We remove semesters for trimesters, and I didn't look up what policy we looked at previous. I think we changed that to the terms rather than semester or trimester.
Sure.
I can't remember what policy that was. I was going to dig through some old minutes.
I think it was a
just to make
graduation one now that I think about it.
Yeah, just to make it.
More neutral, as
Yeah,
we switch
yeah,
back.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
I don't think it actually changes anything.
Just
It's
read
just
the
a
sequences.
verbiage change.
attended Black River Falls High School for at least one complete school year prior to the senior year and complete the first 2 trimesters. So the first 2 terms, if we were at semesters again, that would get messy.
We'd have to change it
right?
anyways, okay.
Right? If I'm playing that through, I think it would still be messy. I know in one we put the penultimate term because it's the one before the last. I mean, we could certainly look at that language. I don't know if that.
Yeah, because I guess I was thinking like that up there, the end of the second term, in that instance, it fits.
End of the second term in which the scholarship is awarded. But what if our terms are back to semesters?
Then we've got to rewrite the policy anyways, because it's the second, yeah.
Yeah, this one is so specific, I'm not sure we could use the more general term.
Okay.
And again, just a reminder that this is no action tonight. This is a chance for to review, and we'll bring this back for the second reading next meeting.
The other piece, I skipped over the staff handbook, I apologize for that. So just process-wise, we invite anybody on the team that would like to come together and talk about the staff handbook. As Amy alluded to Act 10, this has been our process since there is no longer the negotiated agreement. Just for clarity, neither our teacher or our support staff have I can't think of the word, reaffirmed as union, so there is no formal negotiations. It is really a conversation where we come together and say, this is our staff handbook that is meant to clarify the expectations between employer and employee. Let's have a conversation about this, right? So we know that we need great people to want to be here, and as it becomes more and more challenging to find qualified staff that are interested in rural areas, we feel very much when we come to that table that we have to live within our means, and we have to always advocate for what's best for kids and view everything through that lens. But there are some things that certainly can be talked about, and what else could we do to help strengthen that relationship? So the handbook language, as you see, we have 3 handbooks. One is the teacher handbook, one is the support staff, and one is the support services. So you'll see them called out separately on there. On top where it says all handbooks, we really mean that, all of those handbooks. One of the things that is most regularly advocated for is flexibility in time. And so right now, staff members are given 2 personal days each year out of a pool of 10 sick days. So a total of 10 days, can use 2 for personal, which means any or no reason, and then the other 8 would remain as sick days. We are suggesting that after 5 years employment in the district, if somebody is interested in gaining that flexibility with their personal days, that they could trade in 3 sick days for 1 personal day. So right now it's all paid time off, but we have the separate buckets between personal time and sick time. So that was our recommendation there. Support staff and support services. We currently pay out $20 per day above the 100. So we say you can accumulate a maximum of 100 sick days. So clearly you have to have been in the district quite a while to get up to 100 sick days. And then at the end of that year, anything above the 100, we were paying out at $20 a day. That was new probably 5-6 years ago. And while it was nice to do then, $20 doesn't go as far. And if that employee is sick, we have to pay a substitute a lot more than that to come in and cover those responsibilities, if we can even find a substitute to come in and cover those responsibilities. So we are suggesting that that pay changes to $50 for our support staff and support services. And the next line is the same thing for teachers, but we upped the pay to $75, commensurate of the different pay scale that they are compensated on. Under the header of sick leave, there was a lot of conversation. We took out the whole COVID page that you may recall. It was kind of an addendum on the back of our handbooks for the last couple of years. And on there, it talked about the need to report exposure. It talked about the need to monitor symptoms, all of that stuff. We don't believe, we are not recommending that there is a whole COVID page. We're simply wanting to say to people that each employee is entitled to annual designations of sick leave. It is our expectation that when you're well enough to be at work, that you plan to do so. This means if you're feeling unwell and unable to perform your job responsibilities, we expect you to use the appropriate procedures. In short, if you're not well enough to do your work, you should stay home until your symptoms subside. So this was a conversation, somebody was asking about mental health days, and I don't, there was other thoughts that if we spell them out as mental health days versus sick days, it's all paid time off. If you're well enough to do your job, we want you to be here doing your job. If you're not well enough to do your job, then we expect you to use your paid time off and the right procedures that we can try to find a sub for it. So that's what that paragraph means. Support staff, inclement weather. So we have two groups in the support staff. There are some that are scheduled 12 months out of the year, and so they have to work on all of those snow days because they don't have the flexibility of time to make up in summer or evenings. Most of them are full-time already, 40 hours a week. But our people who are scheduled to work less than 12 months, they may not be they're not 40 hours a week, and so we are saying that they can make up that inclement weather time by talking to their principal. They can participate in improved online professional development modules, and there was great conversation around that even if they did the online module, there would be some face-to-face reflection or group processing of that, so that it's not just the modules on their own, but that there would be some conversation facilitated by someone to help with the applicability to their job. They also can request to use any available personal leave for that time that is lost without having to pay the employer share. They could take unpaid leave as well without having to pay for their health insurance piece. So that is some additional flexibility for our support staff on inclement weather days. We want to still pay them for the time, and we're allowing them to be flexible. This is really for the first 3 inclement weather days that aren't scheduled to be made up with kids. We, of course, keep tracking those minutes of instruction. We are well above the minimum expectation. As soon as we start to get close to that minimum expectation, that's when we start making up every minute per minute because we are getting close to that. Teachers on inclement weather days, we are saying that those first 3 days, first we say that they may choose to work from their home if they have the tools they need to do meaningful work. And so we know that we have some teachers who don't have any internet connectivity, and so they have said, I can't do meaningful work from home because I can't connect. That's your call, right? And so we are saying that the first 3 inclement weather days will be used as teacher personal preparation time. They should make themselves available to their administrator colleagues and to student and parent inquiries during their normal work hours. So if you recall our calendar this year, we said we had 3 snow days or inclement weather days that we had some flexibility on minutes. Our support staff, support services, pardon me. This is a group that is also a mix of DPI licensed professional staff as well as some other supervisors. It's really a very mixed bag, and so they get kind of that same opportunities where they can do some online professional development. They could request the unpaid leave, all of those pieces, but they need to do their work from here. We talk about they can't go into overtime, meaning they can't choose to make up all their inclement weather day time in 1 week, so that they would then get time and a half for that time. So. During the last couple of years with COVID, we opened up this whole world of being able to work from home where that has never really been a possibility in education. But we had a lot of conversation about there are some jobs that you just can't do from home, right? If you're expected to supervise students or be responsible for phone calls, if you are physically supervising, if you're one-on-one, all of those things you can't do from home. And so we had a lot of conversation about that and the differences between your job responsibility and whether it can be done from home or not. Yep, that's sports services we covered. Attendance, absenteeism, and tardiness. So that is where we talk a little bit about needing to work from your assigned space unless there's some extenuating circumstances that we would talk about. Payroll, that was just a change that we would ask employees needed to make that designation by September 1st of each year. Assignments, transfers, and vacancies. It used to say that all the positions would be posted internally and externally. Honestly, when Marty posts a job, she emails it out to all staff. So we are just striking that language because it does not need to be there. Unpaid leaves of absence. It used to say that we would require a physician's note to confirm the illness if it was an unpaid leave, and now we are saying it may be requested, but that it is not required for all. That retirement provision, we've presented to the board already about that defined contribution. You're going to hear about that a little bit later, but that is really part of our budget conversation as opposed to just a policy conversation, so know that it is in there. And then that area of language cleanup, you can read, there's just some pretty innocuous things. There was a lot of conversation about dress code, and I would invite any board members who participated in those discussions if you'd like to share any of your thoughts, your reflections of those.
I just remember thinking that it would be pretty hard to spell out what is acceptable and what isn't, and it was brought up to us that a lot of the administrators would love to just have that flexibility of being in charge of their building to, if someone is not appropriately dressed, to take care of that instead of us spelling out, okay, one thing is jeans, okay, jeans, colored jeans, okay, there's so many different variables, so from what I understand, administration feels comfortable handling those situations themselves. And I guess if they feel comfortable, that might be the best way to do it, unless, something else would happen.
So when it was originally written in 2011, jeans were explicitly called out. When you looked at business casual in 2011, jeans were not on the list. If you look at business casual now, jeans are on the list. And so that was a lobbying point that staff were interested in that flexibility. And so we put a link in there that said, here's business casual, and
There are jeans and there are jeans, and that's what we know that. And administration would have to take care of that, because there are certain ones that are not appropriate at all.
There was some discussion on days our teachers are doing specific projects versus when the tech ed teachers are doing specific projects versus, and it got, you're right, it would have to be it would be a huge section of the handbook, and I think with really no benefit.
All right. And so process-wise, so we had those conversations 3 separate nights, one for teachers, one for support staff, one for support services. We had nice participation in them. We took all the notes, Jill and I, and then we sent the notes out to all those people that came to the table and said, is this reflective of our conversation? They all gave it their blessing, so it went to the policy committee, and now it's coming to you for a first reading, just so you know the whole process. When it comes to support staff handbook, there's some updates that haven't happened in quite a while for the bus drivers, and as you know, we are always looking for bus drivers, and so we were very happy to make some changes there. It used to be just $10 for professional meetings. Now we're saying they get their regular route, hourly pay. Extra trips used to be at there were times when they would sign up to take an extra trip, so that meant they couldn't do their regular route, and then the extra trip, like this spring, right, every single sporting event, got canceled, and they'd already given up their regular route, so then they would go without pay for that day. And so we are saying, if you're willing to do those extra trips, we are not going to make you sacrifice your hourly rate in order to be willing to do that, because like I said, this spring has been really rough. So, what else were changes? We made a graduated process for vacation pay, that after X number of years, or in 5 years of service, that there would be additional vacation hours put in there for our 12-month support staff and support services people. And then there was a conversation about teacher attendance at IEPs, and so it is always, in order for an IEP meeting to be legal, there has to be a general education teacher there as well. Our special education teachers do everything they can to schedule those meetings at a time that are going to work for the family and for the general education teacher. Sometimes parents work and can't come in until quite a bit later, and so we've had, for example, a general education teacher who was supposed to be at an IEP that night. Something happened that they couldn't come into work that day. They called in, they got a sub. They never even said to the sub or to anyone else, hey, I'm supposed to be at an IEP tonight. They get to that meeting, and the special ed teacher is there with the parents and no general education teacher. And so we just wanted to elevate that responsibility of general education teachers, that that's not a legal meeting unless there is a general education teacher there for the duration of the conversation, not just in that beginning part. And so we do say that we will compensate teachers for any IEPs that happen before 7 a.m. or after 5 p.m., but that we appreciate that flexibility within there, because the parent needs to be that active participant in those meetings. Conversation about normal workload. This was part of the negotiated agreement, how many minutes of preparation each level got in the handbook. And so we just had some conversation as the schedule continues to change. So it used to be 4 blocks, and so then it said they will teach 3 and have 1 block of prep. Well, then we went to 5 blocks, and then so all of those different things, we basically tried to simplify it and not make us have to change policy every time there was a flip in the schedule by talking about that. So another conversation was had that professional development, that we invest heavily in professional development, and when you talk to our staff, one of my favorite comments when we're sitting on interview committees, when you're interviewing someone else, they say, why do you guys want to be here? And our staff always say, because the district is always willing to support our professional development interests. We find something that we want to dig into, and we ask about a conference, and the district works hard to allow us to be able to do that. And so that is why some people choose to stay, because they get to dive into some of those areas of interest. That being said, we also have expectations of professional development. There are 8 professional development days in each contract each year and on our school calendar. And there are some staff members, and I understand why, it's a lot easier to be gone for personal business when you don't have to plan for a sub all day. But we are saying that when a pattern of behavior is established, meaning the same teacher has appointments or other things every single professional development day for a year, year and a half, that we're going to have a conversation with them about professional expectations, and there will be some arrangement made for them to make up that work afterwards. So that was new language this year as well. There were some other topics brought up that we're not making recommendations to at this time, but they are all there for your review. Questions or comments on that? Was a lot. There's 3 separate meetings all wrapped into one statement. All right. Then the other item is the Student Gender Support Plan. I have copies for any board members that would like to take a look at it. I invited Mr. Nortman because this actually came from the middle school counselor to share, and I can certainly give a summary if you want, or if any of the board members would like to share that we're at the policy committee, whatever your pleasure. Okay, so we have taken the stance for the last as many years as I've been doing this work. When a student or family comes to us and says that their student identifies as a gender different from the one assigned to them at birth, we have not chosen to come to policy. We have chosen to say, how can we be helpful? How can we support you and your child? And how can we live together well is how we've handled it. And so for years, we have single-use bathrooms in both middle school and the high school that we say to that student and to those parents, there's a single-use bathroom. If you're comfortable using that, fantastic, great. And that's what they've done. There have been times when a student has asked for their name to be changed in Skyward, and we've said, I'm sorry, that's a legal name change. We can't do that. There have been times when students have advocated for being called a nickname. And I will tell you that legal advice is when you ask the parent's permission and the parent says yes, you can go ahead and change it. If you ask the parent permission and the parent says no, then you cannot change it. Great. We have opted to ask the parent every time. It has historically been more of a high school conversation than a middle school conversation. In the last 2-3 years, it has really become much more of a middle school conversation. And so Chantal Tibbetts is our counselor at the middle school, and she was just expressing a lot of frustrations with the lack of process. And so I'm gonna flip back to our let's just work individually and make this work at the high school for the last couple of years when these situations have come up. I've heard from those parents and I've heard from those students that they feel like this is a battle they're constantly fighting because I never thought of something like this. And so here's an example. The parent says, yep, go ahead and call the student Shelley. Okay, whatever, just go ahead and call the student that. Well, then the yearbook would come out and it would have their other name there, and the parent would be like, I told you to call him Shelley, I told you not to do that. And we're like, you didn't have it in writing. When the yearbook person did that, we hadn't had a conversation because we handled it all on a one-to-one basis, trying to make it right for the student. So our middle school counselor had a student come to her end of last year that was wanting to identify or is identifying as a different gender. And so counselor calls the parent says, yep, I'm on board. How can we be helpful? Let's partner in this. And so they thought they had asked all the questions, and then the school picture composite came out and what name goes there. And then there is, I can't think of the many examples, but a substitute. So a substitute teacher comes in, and on the roster, it has the name that's in Skyward. And so the kid is just constantly being referred to by the name that they and their parents have said, please don't use that name anymore. And so the counselor was feeling badly for these students and felt ineffective to the parents, and so she went to a conference and found this student gender support plan. She came back and wanted us to make it happen, and I said, ooh, this is a big topic. This is a big conversation. This is a lot more than just us. Let's talk about it. Let's get some legal advice. Let's see where we stand. So, and I'm gonna ask Mr. Nortman if he would share some of, there he is. Would you mind coming up? Because talk to us a little bit about the current status at the middle school right now.
Sure. At the middle school right now, we currently have 7 students. Last year we had 2 students that identified, or 1 to identify differently. This year we have 7 students. All 7 of those students either came to Ms. Tibbetts herself and asked for help, wondering what they should do, or they talked to a teacher and the teacher referred them to Ms. Tibbetts and they came down together. So those 7, you talked about the yearbook, award ceremonies, substitute plans and different things like that. There's a lot of different times throughout the year that this could be helpful.
Throughout the 7 that we have this year, all the students, when Ms. Tibbetts starts this, she always asks, what are your parents going to think? What are they going to say? How are they going to feel? How will they react? Because she really wants to prepare the student to make sure they're ready to have this pretty serious conversation with mom and dad. Of the 7 we had this year, they all were very accurate. My mom will support this, my dad will support this, or I really don't know how mom's going to feel about this, or dad. I don't know how they're going to do. Out of it, 2 of the families actually said, this is something I don't understand, but I need to support my child. And you may do whatever you need to do to make my child feel comfortable at school, but at home, we will call them the name that they got at birth. The other 5, the parents were fully supportive and said, hey, this is what my son or daughter needs, and I will do this at home as well as what you do at school. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now. I don't know what next year's going to bring. I don't know how it's going to work. We had 2 last year, we have 7 this year. I don't know. But what I do know is we're going to do our best to support our students to make them feel comfortable at our school.
And the plan itself is required to be reviewed annually, as well as anytime a parent or student wants to revisit the conversation, of course they can do that. So what this does is it formalizes what we were trying to do casually between an individual student and an individual parent, because when you get to middle school, high school, that student comes in contact with 15 different staff members, right? So to try to get them to remember that for the growing number of students is near impossible. And so I'm happy to share these if you would like, but I just want to reiterate again, the district is taking the stance that we will never act on one of these unless the parent is on board with us. The students initiate by asking the questions, asking to go see the counselor, and then the district partners with the family to create a plan to support that student. The Human Growth and Development Policy or committee that recently met, you guys defined very clearly what was going to be included in the curriculum at what levels and what words were going to be used, all of those pieces. We have parent notification that goes out prior to those units. So I don't take the stance, nor did anybody working on this policy, that it's ours to judge or determine or predetermine any of those things. We are working to partner with the families who have a need for this and to make sure our students feel supported when they're at school. Any more questions for Dan while he's standing there?
I do have a question. In reading what our attorney said, are you proposing to use this as creating a student record or just a form to help facilitate the conversation with the students?
This will go with the student from year to year, and we revisit it every year. It wouldn't be a legal part of the record, but it would follow them.
It would not be a legal
So if
part.
we wrote one for a 7th grader this year, next year, beginning of 8th grade, we would revisit it with the parent and the student again to make sure this is what they still wanted, and use the same plan the next year.
In a more casual way, what is a student nickname policy if they choose to be referred to as a nickname? And let's just bring it up because we're not going to use legal names in this case. How do you handle that now if a student says, I want to refer whatever name it is, it doesn't matter obviously, but and if somebody doesn't actually acknowledge that name, is there anything that's basically the student feels uncomfortable at that point? How do you guys handle that? Is there a policy or a plan of action in there?
Are you referring to like as in
Like,
your book?
if you call somebody Champ, just for example, and I want to be called Champ, my name is Troy, but I want to be called Champ by everybody. I want it by your book, I want Champ. Is there a plan of action for that? I mean, where do we
If you
only...
want it in the yearbook, there would have to be some legal documentation with your parent. So we don't change any of those things. A student can write a different name on the top of their paper.
Of course, yes.
They can certainly
Yes, they
do
can
that.
of course.
But we don't change their Canvas. So every time a student logs into Canvas, their name is there, and in Skyward, their name is there. And so none of that happens without a parent telling us, I legally want you to change this.
And that's where I'm leading with that. If we're looking to change names in Skyward, this is a legal
For
action.
sure, absolutely.
And so this here, talks about changing the name of Skyward. It actually asks there, could you change the name of Skyward? And at that point, if you're changing names, then it becomes a legal process too with the parents to involve, involve the courts in order to change names of students. Because that's a parental action. So therefore, if the school recognizes names outside of the legal system, then where does this I would think if we talk about a policy at this point, because now we're going to talk about legally or recognizing with legal plans in here that may involve Skyward action, which is, like again, Skyward is a DPI recorded.
It's our student information
It's
system.
your information, they can pull from that information, can they not? And they use the gender as a big part of that Skyward.
So just to be clear, every student in Wisconsin is assigned a student identification number, and so that number is what tracks the students as they move throughout all schools. So when you're talking about DPI, they are getting a student number, just to be clear.
They're not doing personally identifiable information in that case, but they are looking at attributes of that person.
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
For sure, demographics, for
Yes.
sure. Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. And so the reason I'm concerned about this is this is actually something that will legally cause problems in the future if you start doing something that's going to go ahead and we're going to acknowledge this identity group versus this identity group, and now where do we draw a line with someone who says I want to identify as anything else, not just gender specific, but do we have a plan of action for that? It could be anything.
I guess I need more information. I don't understand what you mean.
The nicknames,
Identifies
if somebody has a religious affiliation they want to use and they want to be acknowledged as a religious affiliation, you could say, where does it end is where the point is. So when we start basically singling out a certain demographic and then we implement a plan, where's the plans for the other demographics that are out there? And the thing is, and the last part of it is, here's the thing is I have a big concern with is students who do not wish to subscribe to that person's gender identity. Where do we go? What about those individuals that say, I don't feel comfortable with this? Where's the plan of action for that? Because we're here, and we have in here a big part of this, and I'm not sure what page this is because they're not page numbers, unfortunately. How will instances be handled in which the incorrect name or pronoun are used by the following? Staff, then the next line is students. And that implies action. And this is going to be an action against a staff or student, then this is something that needs to be set up in policy. Because if we're going to...
So you're asking for things for this that don't exist in any other realm. So I'm a little bit confused by this.
Well, actually, okay, so what other realm do they... Basically,
So you just said that we'd have to create policy. You've never approved a policy for what happens when a kid goes and punches another kid in the nose.
There is a policy for that, actually. There's a disciplinary action policy in that. And there's also expulsion policy if the student actually acts
There's
up.
an expulsion
so
policy.
basically, there's an action, and then there's a hearing, and then there's a consequence, possibly. But now we're talking about there's an action here. The action here is how it will be handled. What's the hearing part of it? And then what's the consequence in the end? And this question outlines it right here. How will these instances be handled in which the incorrect name or pronoun are used by the following?
Mr. Webb, maybe I could help with that just a
Sure,
little bit.
if you could, that'd be great.
That's how will we help the student work with it. That's not how we're going to work with the student that won't call the right name. That's them saying, hey, Dan, you want to be called Dan, but the student won't. How are we going to help that student? It's not, what are we going to do to the student that refuses?
That leads to the next question. What is part of the plan that we do that students do not refuse to acknowledge that is my question. Is that going to be a disciplinary action on that student or staff? And that's where this leads to. That's where my issue is. Because when we make a plan that identifies a group of 7 students, I'm not arguing that at all. There's a subgroup there, but we have to be careful. If we call the plan, we're emphasizing this plan more than we would just a casual way. Because now we have a plan of action, and to me that would say we're setting up a policy or integrating into policy.
We're looking for a plan, absolutely,
Yeah,
so that
and you're
everybody isn't
integrating into
choosing
a
their own
policy.
adventure, for sure. Not policy yet, because we're not ready. We don't know what the
Handbook
courts
action.
are.
This should be in the handbook if we're going to do something else. Because how we handle students misbehaving is in the handbook. And basically, it's held that this is the defined rules. That basically you adhere to the principals, the teachers, and all those things like that, right? Those are your defined rules. They set up the curriculum. They set up the plan of action for everyone. And now we're going to say outside of those rules, this plan exists.
And I'm
that's the
trying
difference.
to say that what you're describing as discipline, we have the be responsible, be respectful, be safe. We do not have anything that says, if you do this, this is the consequence. If you do this, the only where that exists is AODA and weapon. So you're absolutely right on expulsion, but you're over generalizing on other discipline things. When a student is bullying on the playground, you cannot find a policy that says this is what happens every time.
Bullying policy though, is
There is, but it doesn't tell you exactly. So Troy, but I'm
So
saying
then will
too.
that be transferred to this?
Let me finish all of it, okay? So what you're saying is you should see this, then this. And I'm saying it doesn't exist except for AOTA and weapon, okay? It is up to the principals and the staff to figure out how to remediate that situation. The entire topic here is a support plan. How are we gonna help that kid advocate for themselves? How are we gonna help that kid get the tools? So if somebody calls somebody by the wrong name, that's one thing. If somebody is taunting, bullying, harassing somebody because they identify as another gender, now that's the behavior that we would address, not the lack of calling somebody by a preferred name.
Well, legally, teachers have been called out in court for not addressing by the right proper name.
Not from Black River Falls.
Not from Black River, but in the state of Wisconsin it has, and
that's-
of course, and that's where the difficulty is. And that's where, so now when we have a plan of action, you can use this as a document in court. That makes it a legal document. And therefore, you said this is what we're gonna do, and now you didn't adhere to this plan, and now.
So where does intent come into this? Mr. Nortman, how has the middle school staff responded to some of these conversations?
Very well.
Because, give us a little.
It's what's best for the students. You know, it's what makes them the most comfortable. Our staff, I am not aware of any staff members that are going against any different names or gender identities.
And so you're implying an intent that this is a got you, and the very title says support. So you're looking at it as how it's going to impact everyone else, and we're saying we're trying to support those kids and families that choose to use it.
I'm not against the support aspect of it. I'm against implementing a plan. I think it's something like you have done in the past. You've done it casually. You've worked with the parents. You've worked with the students, and you've worked with probably the primary teacher of that student. And that is something I think that's fine, and that can be documented any way it wants to, and that's a private, confidential thing. But now when you're implementing this, who is this shared with? That's the question, because this is going to be shared with all staff then, right?
It's going to be shared with people who are checkmarked that the student and family say they want
But
to
you
know.
got all the way down to the bus driver in this one. Is that
Right,
correct? Yeah,
right.
exactly.
If that's who they want to know.
Right, and so now it's become essentially all staff.
I have similar concerns to try, and the reason why is because, so if there is a plan, let's say there is a substitute one day and they don't get the information, because sometimes things get overlooked, whether it's
Absolutely.
intentional or not.
Absolutely.
And they maybe call this person by the name by which they no longer want to be called. At some point, that student or their family may reach this tipping point where they're like, had enough, there's this plan, everybody's supposed to know. And that person and maybe another person they're not doing it. And I do worry that it could have negative consequences for the district. Whatever the intent of the plan is, I do
What
worry.
thoughts do both of you have as to how we could help support those students and their parents as they try to navigate? Because you said primary teacher, that just doesn't exist at the middle school and high school because they see so many others. And so what suggestions do you have as to how we could support those students and their families?
A general provision would be something where you'd implement and say, hey, if a student comes to you and says they want to be used, addressed a certain way, just a general provision, not a plan, but basically says this student wants to be addressed a certain way. You come up with a plan that says, well, then we'll just call you by your last name or something like that. So therefore, it neutralizes the situation. It protects the student because that way they get at least a way they wish to be addressed. Maybe not their first name, but it's an alternative way of doing it. And the reason that works is because they've done that in the private sector, in other places too. Like, if you wish to be addressed this way, legally this is how you are on file, but we can address you by your name, of course, by your last name, if it hasn't changed, and we'll go ahead with that. And that way, you're protecting the liability of the district for actually not implementing a plan, and also the student is allowed to work with the parents and the counselors as they see fit, which I think is perfectly fine.
And so
the reason I bring that up is it doesn't put any kind of onus on other students as well to speak in a certain coerced way, and that's the difficulty of this plan. Is this encourages coerced speech. It says, well, you have to do it the way they wish, and that's where it gets difficult. And the last part of it is, I guess one more point was, we're talking about sixth graders here who are 11, 12 years old, who haven't even gone through the course of human growth and development yet. Until seventh grade, they just learned terms, and now they're going to be forced to deal with this, and basically, I'm not sure all the students are ready for that yet. And this is not in the last. I guess I keep having more for you.
Stop at the last. Just keep going.
Okay, that's fair enough. And human growth and development, this is a part of, now, if this plan gets implemented, I'm not saying it's going to be tonight, but if it does, this is a way around how the curriculum is presented to the parents. Because
Tell me more about that.
If this plan's implemented, now you're going to have students that with school support talking about their gender identity and a plan of action. So therefore, how are you going to talk to other students about it? That's part of this plan. So therefore, now you are injecting that terminology to students who have not opted
And so that
opt
currently
out.
happens casually, right?
No, this is going to be, if this plan is in action, there's counselors talk to the students about it too. You know?
I'm saying that currently happens is what I'm saying. We currently have 7 students at the middle school.
Yes. But the thing is, we haven't said what we're going to do about it when they talk about it. That's in other words, so now you have a plan, therefore you have implemented a official plan to do that. And that's where right now it's casual. And I would say if a student asks a teacher about it in a class, I agree, that is a casual conversation, and at that point, it's a teacher's discretion. I would not argue that. But as far as saying that now the bus driver is involved, you've set up a plan that is actually going to dictate that this is part of now of the terminology is going to be exposed to students who parents may not wish that right now. And the thing is, and it's going to be done from the position of authority to the students, not just one student asking another. This is where we're at right now. But when you start talking about teachers, well, you have to address this person this way, now you've done terminology and you've implemented it as instruction. And that's the difficulty I have with it. I hope that makes sense.
I'm following you.
Okay.
I'm with you. I am saying that there are students and families seeking more support than they are currently receiving. And to your concern, I would say we have 50 students on 504s. Have you ever heard of a staff member discipline because they didn't follow? You know, again, I feel like we're coming at it from a gotcha standpoint when that is, we have a lot of plans for individual students that we do our best for staff members to know what they are and how to best support the students. And a gotcha mentality would be, you didn't do that, so therefore you're in trouble. We do take complaints from parents that are frustrated that
I would just hate to see if, because something got overlooked at some point, that teachers or anybody got in trouble for it.
And so the other piece that I included for you guys is that it is currently being legislated. So we don't know what the law is going to tell us we have to do. I don't know where that lies. That's why it was a support.
I want to make sure that all of our students are treated with respect and dignity, and that there's good communication with families. I think that's very important. And if there's mental health issues that are part of this, that those are not being overlooked. You want your students to be healthy and in a good place. I will say that one section that you were talking about, how will instances be handled in which the incorrect name or pronoun are used by the following, and that is the staff or students. In my mind, when I read that did seem to imply how would you handle that with the staff, with the student, not how would you handle it with the person whose pronoun or name is used incorrectly. So if that is the intent of it, I would try to make sure that gets
certainly. I understand what you're saying. When you think about going through this document, a conversation with the student and their parents, you're talking to that student. How are you? So I understand what you're saying when you read it from another person out. If you are the one engaging in Johnny, how are you going to handle it when an adult uses the wrong pronoun? How are you going to handle it when a student uses the wrong name? So it's meant to guide that student towards that conversation, but I understand what it looks like. So if I could just ask, I don't think it is reasonable to expect staff to all casually remember this. So I heard you say, could you write down a plan, but not this plan? We're in a really weird middle ground. Are there components of this that we could agree would be okay to have a conversation with a student and their parent? And so take out the pieces that you think are aggressive, because I recognize this is an uncomfortable topic for a lot of people. It's a really uncomfortable topic for these 7 students and their parents. And what can we do that we can all feel comfortable with, so that we can say to them, we recognize that you have needs. How about this, right? Is there some middle ground that we could arrive on that we can still say we're protecting and advocating for those students while not infringing on the other students as you suggested?
I don't know that I have the answer to that, at least not now, but I just wanted to share that those were some of my initial thoughts looking at this, and those were concerns that came to mind.
I think we want to find something that will help our students. I hear what you're saying, Troy. Some of those things I think we could work on. I think I agree with what you said, Shelley, that maybe we need to look at this and think through each spot. We want to help kids. That's our job. We want to help kids and parents. But maybe there are some areas that we can work on in here. I do hear that, I'm really.
Even if we wrote it as a reflection for the student, when one of my classmates calls the wrong name, I'm going to, right? So that it is really directed at how helping that student brainstorm responses, because that punishment, that did not enter my mind until you said it. I understand that perspective now. I did not have that before. So maybe that could be written as a student reflection. When one of my teachers calls me the wrong name, I will, right? I mean, we could certainly.
If it is something that is something for the students to use, why don't we take the word plan out of it and just call it a worksheet for the student to use? And that would be something that they would work through with.
Because that feels like semantics to me. I don't understand the difference with the word plan on there or not.
Because a plan requires action, whereas a worksheet does not. That's why. When you say I have a plan to implement, that means that you're going to go, there's an action, and there's a basically you're going to do. There is. I mean,
but there is some action that we're going to come out of it.
But a worksheet would be something more like, hey, this is what the student prefers. They obviously work with the counselor and their parents in order to accomplish this.
Okay. If that name is going to make a difference to you.
And I will, honestly, because when you, I know what we've talked about words before, and I think they have a lot more meaning than sometimes people assign to them. That's all. And so this here, if you were to say, right now tonight, if we had to make a decision, I say the first 3 pages are within, I think, obviously reason, because they deal with exactly what you talked about. They're talking about how the student wants to be addressed, and how basically the main factors are the other students, and how is the student reflecting upon himself, how other students will do, how staff members, parents, and community. It's very generic in that sense, where a student will say, okay, everyone, it's how they relate just a general school day. Whereas further down, this starts really digging down into, we have to do all these, there's a lot of more actions that are requested, and the thing is, actions may not be what you call it, but basically if you're telling that the yearbook committee, if you're telling the PA when they announce, if you're telling all the bus drivers, you are making a plan and you're acting on it, and that's the issue I have with it. That's what I'm saying. So if we just call it a worksheet and revise some of it, I think it would be great to go back and maybe revise some of the things and make it more reflection-based versus action-based. I think it would be something that would, I think, assist the students and the parents. And I think that's a big part of this is communication. I would not argue against that.
And so would the board prefer to have a subcommittee come and talk about this, or would you like to send it back to policy committee, which June is the next policy committee? What is the preference of the board?
Is this document been shared, obviously with us, has it been shared with middle school staff at all, or no? Just us?
Has this been shared with any of these particular families to get their input on its usefulness?
So
That would be a good idea.
Chantel definitely has used this to make a checklist. So it used to be she would call the parent and talk about it. They would, this is what we'd like. And then academic presidential excellence awards come up, and the secretary is typing the name in the program, and then they're not sure what to do. So then Chantel would call the family again and say, yep, do that. And then they're ordering yearbook, and then, what are we gonna do? So it was all this. So she has made a checklist that she tries to talk through with the parent all in one shot, as opposed to constantly back and forth. But I don't believe they use this plan.
I think because of the nature of this, there needs to be consistency. Because if it's not handled consistently, that could cause its own bucket of worms.
When you asked whether it should go to policy committee or a separate committee, I think people, if it goes to a policy committee, then you're saying it's going to be possibly made into policy, and that's not where we are now. So I would rather see it go to a separate committee. But through this whole thing, I've just been troubled with that statement you read, with that inflammatory language that got everybody so wild. We are so glad all you people are here. But when I read that language, I thought, we're not here to try to do something in secret that wouldn't be good for kids, so that just still bothers me terribly. We're here to talk about it and find what's best for kids. We're not trying to do anything secretively, and that just really bothers me. But that, I'm sure that got all of you wild. It would me too. And that's not what's
Yeah,
happening.
it's not true.
That's not what's happening.
And I'd like to also state, you brought up, 504 plans, similar to meeting every child's needs. And if I recall how that works, it's like you're always asking the student, how do you advocate for what you need? Like, how are you going to let people know what you need if it's not happening? And I mean, this is all part of that as well. I mean, the students are learning how to advocate for their needs to be met and to be their authentic self.
Mr. Nortman, I'm sure that you had contact with all 7 or most of these students, and what is their feeling? Do they feel that they would like something more? Not necessarily as a policy, but just that everybody sees and understands and can react to. They have a general feeling that everybody else should be informed about them.
Yeah, they want everybody else to know. They don't want to remind Mr. Norman, hey, I go by this. They just want it to be a normal part of their day. That everybody understands this is what I want, this is how I'm moving forward. So that's what they want. Yeah.
So I've heard one that says they'd like a subcommittee. I've heard 2 that have some significant concerns. What would the board like to do with it?
It's on the schedule to be brought back again next month for a approval or disapproval. It doesn't need board approval.
It was brought as an awareness, and so I wanted this conversation to happen at some point so that we can all feel good about it. And so how do we make that happen? Do we need to schedule another? I know Ms. Tibbetts would like to be here, the middle school counselor.
Yes, that would be very helpful.
And she did come to the policy committee.
That's cool. The policy committee has limitations, so how do you go about?
Well, the purpose of the policy committee is just to review things and move forward to the board.
Right, and now we've reached that point. So now if the board pushes it back to a committee.
Well,
now what is the
I think what Dr.
process?
Severson was suggesting, maybe we could reconsider and have a different committee that have the active people who are involved in this, a part of that committee, including Mr.
Mr. Norman as well, yes, please.
Someone from the high school and
I would be supporting of that. I don't know how that would look at this moment. That's something that maybe we could discuss in the next meeting, a special meeting or something. Do we have a special meeting scheduled for next week as well?
Yes.
I think it's something that we could probably all reflect and maybe come up with a proposal.
So I would like to send an invite to all families, sharing the intent and invite them to the discussion.
One thing that I think, unless I missed it, I didn't see it on here, you had mentioned that you review this stuff annually with the families and the student, which I think is good because there are people who say, well, I identify this way now, and then they change their mind. And so I think whatever you ultimately come up with, I would like to see there is a regular review period be included as part of the document.
So me, at my age, when we first started having this conversation, I was like, middle schoolers, really? Like, do they even know? Like, I even said to Chantel, what if somebody, every other week, they change their mind? And she said, it hasn't happened. Not once in the 3 years I've been here, not once has somebody flip-flopped. And I said, I stand corrected then. That was my ignorance and my assumption. And so I think it's very valuable to talk to students, families, and the staff that are actually dealing with it as opposed to my preconceived
Because I know
perceptions.
I have listened to people and read articles about specific people who have gone through the whole process of transitioning and then detransitioned. So it does happen, and sometimes their detransition was because they had deeper mental health issues that never got addressed.
And when you think about what other things in life does a 12-year-old get to make a decision at 12 and it just is for the rest of the right? That just doesn't happen. And so regular review makes good sense.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that we will schedule a separate committee meeting to talk about a gender support plan. And so we were talking about middle school, high school. Just looking at trends, I feel like it should probably be a district-wide conversation because we have no idea when Red Creek could have somebody knocking on their door wanting a similar conversation. So I think engaging in the conversation more holistically makes better sense than us deciding who should be there. Is that acceptable to the group?
And then we will invite community or parents to.
That's what I meant, yes.
So you want like a special meeting agenda, basically, or a special meeting process?
It wouldn't be a board.
But it wouldn't be a full board meeting, but
Wouldn't be a board.
in order for the whole board to be there, though, that would.
So you can't have it both ways. So
That's
either it's
my
a working
point.
committee.
That's my point, yes.
Yeah.
So if you want full engagement, then you'd have to have a board meeting. If you do want just 2 or 3 board members there, then it could be a committee style meeting.
Sorry, when I heard committee, I assumed it would be a few
Yes.
representatives from the board. If you feel differently, then please tell me that. Okay, then I think, I'm gonna guess that you'd like to be on that committee.
I would like to be.
Perfect. Would you like to be a community rep on that committee?
Um,
I'm being sarcastic, you don't have to commit to that right now, so between now and next month's meeting, we are gonna try to advertise and have this conversation. What other board members would like to join Troy in that discussion?
Again, all first readings.
I would be glad to do that.
I can.
Okay.
We got 3 board members and that's it.
Thank you.
Is it possible to get any legal perspectives of things that are happening around the country to be part of the discussion?
We sure can. Things are in courts right now and they're undecided. And so she really said, that's why I'm not suggesting that you even consider a policy right now. Just this, again, was meant to bring out into the open the topic that we need to come up with some solutions for.
And we don't have a final date that we have to have this done by.
No, there's nothing.
And I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of concern from parents comes from things that we do hear about happening in other school districts and other states and whatnot, where this is happening and parents are completely unaware of it. And especially when you hear about this being brought up to kids in elementary school level, that's very concerning. And so I know that our parents don't want to see that happening.
We don't get to control the whole conversation though, right? Students and families control their parts of it.
Okay, so we have a plan. We'll revisit our policy updates next meeting. So review those changes in the first reading. Okay, so no action on that. Any more discussion? Okay, we move on to focus on purpose, the 6th grade English language arts.
Thank you for patiently waiting.
No worries. Hi, my name is Jordan Barth. This is my 3rd year teaching at Black River Falls Middle School, teaching 8th grade literacy. And my 1st year teaching, or leading our professional learning community within the Department of ELA. First off, just want to say how excited I am with the current trajectory of ELA right now. This is our 2nd year that we've implemented My Perspectives curriculum. And it's just shown so much to us in terms of identifying standards, really hitting the nail on those standards as well, and also providing students with multiple levels of exposures to this different content. And just working right now within our PLC, we have about half our department members who are new teachers. And I mean, just looking at them, you couldn't tell, right? Because they seem like they're vets already. And we all share that same passion for helping students within the literacy curriculum and helping advance their skills throughout our teaching practices. What we've currently been doing is we've had a major focus on our guarantee works. So looking at our standards and figuring out, okay, what are we guaranteeing throughout our units. So you can see up there, we actually work together as a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade group, identifying those guarantees that we feel are necessary for students to know by the end of their respective grades. As you can see up there, we have different standards, including citing evidence, using inferences, summarizing, as well as other writing standards that deal with argumentative essays, writing explanatory essays, narrative essays, and constantly reevaluating ourselves, constantly reevaluating how we're teaching, and the skills that we are trying to look, and using data as that focal point as well. That's been a huge focus of our PLC this year, is just bringing in those different data points to see, okay, where are we going? What is this data telling us? And what do we need to change? Because we're not perfect, right? Never going to be perfect, and that's okay. So being able to look inward on ourselves and say, hey, what do we need to focus on here has been our number one goal as we've been working with standards, as we've been moving into standards-based education. So these next couple slides, just talking about the same, we've been using the same standards together pretty consistently, looking at ways that we can implement common assessments, assessing these standards throughout 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and then coming together during PLC time to identify gaps in knowledge and figuring out, okay, how are we going to support somebody in 7th grade who may not have gotten these skills or may not have, learned these skills in 6th grade? How are we going to prepare them for 8th grade? Vice versa, looking at how are we going to help students who are far and above? How are we going to meet their needs as well? And so we have been, as you can see on the next couple slides, 8th grade, same standard. On the next slide right there, we have a process that we've been doing with these standards. So we've been looking at first, okay, what standards do we think are guarantees? What are standards that we think by the end of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade do we want students to come away with, right? And then once we've identified those common standards, we've started to unwrap them, right? Really dive deep into those standards and figure out, okay, what skills are these asking our students to do, to show, to perform, to master, okay? And so we've been coming up with learning targets by unpacking or unwrapping those standards, right? And currently we're kind of finishing up that part and then looking back at those standards and figuring out how can we make this more student friendly? How can we help fill in that gap that maybe when a student looks at this word jumble up in the board, right? How are we going to help them understand what is being expected of them, right? And so we've been looking at, okay, let's turn this into, or let's use student-friendly language within the standards. So that's been our current work right now. At the end, it'll show you kind of where we're going, but that's where we're at right now. On the next slide, right here, you can see some current work. I am the 8th grade teacher, so I can't really speak to what's going on in 6th and 7th grade right now, but from what I'm hearing from them, just great work that's been going on. I know 6th grade, they just had some work using the Orton-Gillingham program to help with those reading skills and expand those vocabulary, and they've just told us how much using those assessments and really diving deep into the different parts of words, the different parts of language, to help them increase their vocabulary knowledge. It's just been really encouraging to hear and really been convincing us, hey, maybe that's something that we want to look into as a whole department to try and implement here. 7th grade has also been working very intently with my perspectives. They just wrote some persuasive units or persuasive essays, and as I remember back in November, they actually worked with some Ho-Chunk students from the high school to have this day for Native American Month. And so that was something that they were just so excited for, and the students were so excited for that. So that was really awesome to hear from them and from their side. And then for 8th grade, I speak a little bit more on this. We just had, after 2-3 years, kind of taking a break because of COVID, we had the Tuesday Club come in for their creative writing contest, and we used that within 8th grade, which this year we had one runner-up and one top winner from our 8th grade class, which was very exciting, very encouraging. Students took to that contest very well. They really enjoyed being able to express themselves through their writing as well. And then recently, we've also been doing argumentative essays throughout the My Perspective curriculum. allowing students to identify injustices that they see in their current world, and then what their solutions to fix those injustices are. And just seeing the passion that some of these kids have shown through their writing, it's just been unbelievable. It's been so encouraging to see this kind of supportive idea that when you really get students passionate about what they're working on, they are going to turn in amazing work. And just seeing the amount of research that they've been doing and the amount of like rereads that they're doing over it, just make sure that it's showing exactly what they know, is just so awesome to see, right? And you know, even with this argumentative essay, we've reassessed how we've kind of taught the essay unit, right? Changing up our style, changing up the way that we are allowing this drafting process and helping students with this drafting process, and it's just shown so much. And that's just our goal as a PLC, to constantly reassess our teaching abilities, our teaching strategies, and to implement new ways to teach this content to our students. And so on the final slide here, that's a blank slide. On the final slide here, our next steps is that we are finishing unwrapping our literacy guarantees, trying to prepare for standards-based education coming up here. And we want to look at creating rubrics, right? Knowing and helping other teachers figure out, okay, how, now that we have these guarantees, how do I assess them, right? How do I understand if a student has mastered this guarantee? If what we are saying is a guarantee is guaranteed for them to learn and to know, right? So that's going to be hopefully our current, the way that our literacy department is going right now. That's something that we really want to get to before the end of summer, and if we have time, identify different formative and summative assessments to measure that student mastery, right? I've actually been working with my 8th grade level partner in kind of looking at our current assessments right now and applying those guarantees back to them, right? Kind of starting that process of how is this going to look like when we really start getting the ball rolling with our standards-based education. So just kind of close here, we're so excited to see where our literacy curriculum is progressing and constantly reassessing how are we going to teach to the standards for our students in practices and ways that are best for our students.
Middle school took a nice jump forward on the state report card, and literacy was a big part of that. I'm curious, are you noticing, so second year with that the curriculum resources, your iReady scores, are you seeing some nice growth this school year?
Yeah,
right now is state testing time, right?
Yes, absolutely. One of I've actually been working, so again, with my 8th grade level partner, our SLO for this year has been looking at that iReady data and identifying a weak point, which in this case was vocabulary, which from hearing for 6th grade with the success that they're having with the program that they're currently doing is really encouraging to us and something that we are thinking about wanting to try out when that's available again. But even just seeing from our fall iReady scores to our winter iReady scores, we already smashed our SLO goal with that vocabulary, so we kind of had to go back in and reassess, try and push our students more, and we're really proud of that progress that they're making. But just because they've made that progress now doesn't mean that they can't learn more. And so we're looking at how can we further push them to try out something more to improve in those skills as well. So.
At 3 years, you're the veteran staff member and the leader of the group, so we really appreciate your willingness to do that.
Of course, thank you.
I did want to say that you were excited about the passion that your students showed, and we're excited about the passion you show as a teacher. And really appreciate you sending your presentation in advance so we could go to the links and everything. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
I just had one question.
Yeah.
For each grade level, you had 4 major guarantees, I think.
7.
Okay,
yeah, so there were more on that slide.
Okay.
I think that
just showed that, but
yeah,
that's what I was asking.
Yep.
Okay, then that clears up the question, because when I clicked on the links, I saw a lot more listed.
Yep, and so we have, right up there, all that, the PowerPoint slide was able to show were the reading guarantees. We do have writing guarantees as well. We have 2 writing guarantees. One of them is split up into 3 separate, focusing on arguments, creative writing, and then there's one speaking and listening standard as well.
Okay, that answers my question, because I only saw those you clicked and there were more.
Any more questions or discussion?
I have kind of a general one. Are we still doing the 2 class periods a day with
Yes.
ELA?
Yep.
And is that both 6th through 8th grade, or is
It is, yep. And we do the same for math,
Yeah.
that there's 2 blocks.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing.
And in addition to that target time, remember we used our ESSER funds on interventionists, instructional coaches, and they play a part in all of that standards work as well.
Yeah, and target time has been very helpful in trying to fill in those gaps, especially implementing some phonics level learning for some of these students. Recently, we've been working on kind of focusing on these guarantees during that time, helping students who may be struggling a little bit or may be a grade or 2 level behind and trying to get them filled up or filled in by that point. So
There's some good results. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ryan.
Next is employment recommendations.
All right, we've got a couple, quite a few on here actually. First off, I just wanted to congratulate Sarah Anderson. She is a longtime teacher in Black River Falls. I tease her and call her Miss Black River Falls sometimes because of all the work that she's done, coaching, advising, volunteering, and all of the work that she does in addition to her full-time teaching role. She is very excited to retire at the end of this school year, so congratulations to her. In the room, I'm also going to call up Miss Laura Simonson, who has worked for our district for 27 years, who told all of us today that she is moving forward, right? Forward, not backwards. She's moving forward. So she is heading to a principalship in Wausau for some, yes. So we will very, very, very much miss her contributions. Laura and I started teaching together out in Hickston. We had our kids at the same time. We worked together for many, many, many years. So I wish her nothing but fabulous success, even if I'm pouty and whiny that we're going to lose her on our admin team. And I think I speak for all of us when I say we are going to miss her terribly on our admin team. So the others, you can see them up there. So
Make a motion to accept the employee recommendations.
I'll second.
Any discussion or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Now we're on to our health insurance discussion.
Jill, did you want to summarize a little bit? I told the, last week at our board meeting, I told the board a little bit about the process that we use, that we called an insurance committee together, but.
Okay. Yeah, so just to echo that, we called a committee together and so we had about 12 people. It was open to all and we had good representation across the district and across jobs, student teachers, and support staff. This has been a journey. We've been looking at the co-op for a few years and it served us well, but it was 3 years in and it was time to look at bids for the co-op and we wanted to take the opportunity to see what it would look like for us on our own as well again, see what kind of opportunities are out there and put us back on the market as well. So we were able to do that with another agent, another broker, and we did get a really good quote from WEA Insurance. Those of you who had been around, we used to be with WEA Insurance a long time ago and for many, many, many years. So we did give a very competitive quote. It would result in actually a reduction in overall premium for the district. So by making some plan design changes, increasing our deductible a little bit, and paying those claims as they're incurred, we can actually save money doing that. We talked to the committee gave some feedback on it, and everybody was unanimous in moving ahead with going to WEA Insurance, and that would be the recommendation to the board.
I attended that for most of the meeting, and it was widely representative of all of our staff groups too. So that was good to hear that it was unanimous.
Yeah, that's nice because usually with insurance you don't get.
People will have a choice to either, so an individual may choose the Gunderson network or the Mayo network, and so the fact that there were still choices felt like it was going to meet the staff's needs. In our current plan, there's an upcharge to have both options. In our new plan, you can't do both, you have to pick one or the other. And there was one staff member who was mildly disappointed, and then she said, I'll tell my husband to turn it around because, yeah, so their family was gonna make it work.
They
out.
could do both, but they'd have to pay a copay,
Right.
co-insurance for
Right.
that to do both. Right now, actually in our Mayo network, going to Gunderson is not a choice unless you pay that upcharge premium to do that. So.
Well, everyone saw the information. Do you have any more questions? Discussion? Is there a motion to approve the health insurance kit as presented?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried. Now oath of office, and we'll invite Nick to come forward.
You guys. When did you have them printed, or, oh, you already gave them to them?
And Brad, you
Okay.
got two.
So did you have them printed? Okay, perfect. Do you want to mute this? Yep.
I wasn't sure if you told me to put it
You're
up
going
there.
here, and I'm gonna take a picture. She's gonna mute the screen so it's not lit up in your background.
And as the board clerk, I'd like you to each raise your right hand and one at a time read your oath of office, please. How about you, Nick, first?
I, Nick Helston, have been elected or appointed to the office of school board member. I have not yet entered upon the duties, therefore swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my abilities. So help me God.
Welcome to the board. Brad?
I, Bradley Dobbs, have been elected or appointed to the office of school board member, but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof. Swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability, so help me God.
That's for the board. And you have the code of ethics already. I'll give you one, Nick, and we'll talk more about this at next week's board. You need to sign those.
Is this for the wild applause?
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. We'll talk about that.
Again, as Mary Jo said, next week we'll be continuing the conversation about our code of ethics and our norms discussion that we've already started. This is our current policy though right now, so we'll be working on that next week. We did just do the Senate report.
Dr. Sullivan.
Yes, okay, the student success report.
Hello, so I get to talk today again about standards-based grading, and I'm also going to practice one of the things we've been talking about, which is multiple exposures. So I'm going to again go back and revisit some of our previous principles that we've talked about. So to begin, the first one I talked about was multiple exposures, and that's just common sense, right? We need to share information about skills with students multiple times over time so that we can see if growth has occurred. The last time that I spoke, the grading principle we talked about was when we will no longer assign a group grade for individual work. So if a child for group work, so an individual would not receive the work done by the students in a group. So, and then just to revisit back, one step back, is that when we're talking about grading, the major reason we're grading is to communicate a child's progress in their skills or their progress along specific standards. So grades is the number one way that we can communicate how a child is doing. So for tonight, we're going to talk about no longer providing extra credit. And so let's go back and think about our previous principles. We aren't providing that extra credit for a student that might need extra help, right? Because we're exposing that child multiple times. That's how we're getting at that skill. And secondly, when we're thinking about the grade and our communication about how we are communicating a grade, if we are including extra credit where, like maybe this is something I did as a teacher, is this child would get extra credit for bringing in pencils, right? That doesn't help me communicate with parents how that student is doing in standards or how they're doing in English or math or any content area. And then we kind of have a metaphor of French onion soup that Mr. Manson was kind enough to share, the French onion soup metaphor for thinking about no longer providing extra credit. So if you
Okay. So Nicole and I were meeting, and Kim were meeting today. We meet monthly?
Yes.
Is that a monthly meeting?
Yep.
We have so many meetings, I can't remember which ones are monthly and not. And she said she was talking about this tonight, and she asked me, do you have any stories about extra credit? And I'm like, I do. My sister-in-law went to Eau Claire North High School. She took 5 years of French, okay, and speaks 0 French, can read 0, she understands 0, nothing. I mean, and she'll gladly admit this. And she got A's all the way through because there was always the opportunity to bring French onion soup or some other cuisine that you created, and that was extra credit. And so it made up for, I mean, it's kind of mindless and hard to imagine, but that's the truth. And I was guilty of it as a young teacher too. We had, I taught Spanish, and so if we had a fiesta for something, they're like, oh, if you bring food, you get extra credit, and just how silly that is. It doesn't communicate learning, you know. So it's kind of embarrassing, but it's true.
And so going back to Mr. Barth, when he was presenting earlier, we're working really hard at identifying what's essential, what is most important for our students to know. And in doing so, that really helps us identify what we need to communicate about how students are doing. And that's like the big framework for how we really think we're going to be moving our district forward and really looking for that as success that we are hoping for. Is there any questions?
As always, differentiation again. It's when a student has mastered the skills, where do they represent or how do they pursue the fact that they've actually gone above and beyond what their expectations are? Without extra credit, do they get to promote to the next level, or how does that work? I mean, because a lot of this standard-based grading is meeting a certain assessment or a certain achievement, or however you want to. They master it. That's what I'm looking for. They master the skill, but once they've mastered it, and say they are accelerated above the rest of the class because they've mastered the skill, where do you go as a teacher? What's your resources then?
So let's just make sure. So in sometimes, right, that's why extra credit is used.
Sometimes. Yeah, it's
so for in the
widely
case, one
used.
extra credit is used that way. So extra credit is used in a variety of different pieces. So it's really clear to make sure. So when it comes to acceleration, right, it all comes back to, we want to talk about the students learning, right? And so we have mechanisms in place right now. So when he talked about target time, we have target times that are working around the standards so that we can accelerate students within that standard. And sometimes it's not about going to the next grade level, it's about going deeper and being able to show more knowledge that way. So I was an English teacher, right? So you can look at a text in many different ways and show more analysis or better summaries or better ways of talking about that text. And I apologize, I'm stuttering all over my words there. But it's identifying the ways that we can help move our students forward and using data and using those PLCs that we're talking about so that we can ensure that their learning gets the growth that they should have.
Nicole, you had described to me I want to say it was an 8th grade target time that was above level. Could you describe, I'm messy on the details, I want to say there was some content from CISA that, could you describe that
Yep,
scenario?
so CISA has offered a variety of opportunities for students that are showing us they're in that talented and gifted range where we can get students access to more higher level thinking, more higher level skills, but still looking at the standards and the way that we're kind of looking at. So, gosh, off the top of my head, I didn't prepare it, but without looking at the sheet exactly what those activities were, but it was like some robotics types of things, but it is a gamut of different topics of interest.
My biggest question about standard-based grading is if you relate to the standard grading system right now, you have the letter grades, A, B, C, D, E, F. right now, and a lot of, well, D is a passing grade, but we would never, I don't think anybody's gonna say that's mastering the skill. I would not argue that. But a C level was considered average. And that's where it feels like that SBE is puts everybody average. And the reason I ask about the differentiation is because if you went above and beyond and you mastered this skill, you excelled at this skill, you understood more of the parameters of the skill, you would get a B or an A basically because you had mastered the skill and you went above and beyond what was expected. And so now without extra credit, without actually moving someone to the gifted and talented program, where the differentiation is no longer there. That's because you mastered the skill. That's excellent. But now, where do they go from there? If they're not at the gifted and talented level, I still fear the differentiation, and that's where the letter grading system has a pretty well evaluative form that goes this A, B, C, D, and
So
if you're F, obviously you didn't master
explain a little bit about grading just in general right now.
Yes.
So the research would disagree with you on how grades are, because there's so many layers right now to what being an A student means. And it might just mean I am really good at following my teacher's directions. I come in and I get extra, my mom helps me at night, and I might not learn anything and bring in French onion soup and end up with an A, right? So it's like going back to that. And that's an extreme example, but it's just like to keep thinking in mind, like what is the learning that's taking place? And the reason that so many school districts across the country are moving to standards-based grading is so that we can get really dialed in on what the learning is and what each student is showing growth on.
And if I could just offer another perspective, and so you had said that C is an average grade. That's not really the way the world looks at C, right? We have a lot of
generalizations. I was giving generalizations. I'm just saying A would not be considered average. B would probably not. So then you look at C as because it's the middle of the road.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say the middle of, in every different classroom, that C might mean a different thing. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's the learning that took place in that course.
If I could, so in our strategic plan, we say that we want parents to meaningfully engage in their child's education. So we have students that have been straight A students using our current grading system, and on a standardized test, they are scoring below grade level. That's a significant disconnect between what our current grading system is portraying and students demonstrating proficiency on the grade level standards. And so as we have worked with our families to be more clear about their child's skills, the letters that go home that say your child is performing below grade level, we're going to program them into this for target time or whatever. We have some parents that say, really? They've been a straight A student. What do you mean they're behind? To Nicole's point, some kids that are respectful, they follow the rules, like they play school really well, and so they work really hard on their homework, but then when it comes to a test, they can't demonstrate that they know the knowledge. And so I think the disconnect between current grade point average and achievement scores would say what we're currently doing isn't an accurate reflection of what kids know and able to do. And so the idea of switching to reporting out on the standards, you're right that a student that would work extra credit to get an A, that same student is going to work to demonstrate their mastery of those standards so that they get the 3 or 4, whatever the top number is. So that those motivated students that were going to work for extra credit are also going to work to demonstrate proficiency. So that won't necessarily change. I think the challenge is going to be to communicate clearly enough what mastery looks like, what approaching proficiency looks like that those little steps in between are going to be the challenge. I think like you said, a failing grade or it demonstrates no proficiency and mastery, those are going to become really easy. I think our challenge is going to be in those middle areas. And so I would just offer that based off what we asked a question on our parent feedback survey, my child is at or above grade level. Last year, we had a much higher percentage of parents that answered yes to that question. This year, that percentage of parents that answered yes to that is lower. And I think that's a good thing because that means that we're effectively communicating to those parents that their child isn't at grade level. And so creating this sense of urgency for the families to partner and really, work with us. So I think that there's going to be things to iron out as we move forward for sure, because it is a whole different way of looking at it. But I have a hard time looking at the way we have been doing it and say, we're meeting all of our needs doing this, why change? So I think that the fact that more parents are acknowledging their kids are at grade level is a credit to those respectful conversations that are happening that says your child needs to do something different. So it's a whole mixed bag, and if you look at the purpose of grading to communicate progress, then I think the clarity around all those different little details is what becomes most important. So.
And to your point, like you said earlier, right now, graders are not reflecting actual standardized assessments, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So standards-based grading then will more accurately reflect over the standard-based assessment. That's what we're saying right now, because we're aligning the mastery to the assessments that are given out on a standards, whatever.
You heard Mr. Barth talk about guarantees. Those
Yes.
guarantees are aligned to the grade level assessed guarantees.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we should see at least more students, if they're reclaiming their mastering it,
Yes.
we should see more students succeeding on those assessments.
Correct. The two should align much more closely than our current grade point averages align. Mm-hmm. But then when we say grade point averages, we also, at our elementary school, we haven't given letter grades for a long time, and yet 6th grade teachers always hear from a parent, but they've been a straight A student. They haven't gotten letter grades, so they're not. But that's the language that parents know about grading, and so it just is part of that whole communication.
Well, thank you for your
Well, I think that's one
appreciate
of the big challenges, and Nicole and I have talked about that as well, is communicating to the parents, these are there are 3rd grade standards, 4th grade standards, and then communicating, this is where your child is on these. And I think that's just going to provide more communication, but clarity for the parents.
And that sense of urgency, right? Like we have to partner.
And knowing exactly, like your student gets a C, well, what don't they know? They know 2 letter grades below what we want them to know, versus having the actual standards that you can say, okay, my student can't do X, Y, and Z.
And I'm going to go back to Mr. Barth because this was a perfect use of it. So they did that assessment, then they found out vocabulary was the problem as opposed to reading is the problem, right? So much more detailed that it becomes actionable as opposed to their low readers. Their reading scores were where they needed to be. The biggest problem was vocabulary. Now we can work on filling that hole. It's just so much more actionable the more clear you are about those learning techniques.
One of the things that I thought was kind of fit into this when I guess Christian was sort of that age in middle school when they were doing maybe a writing project, whether it was their history project, and they had a rubric and it said, well, if you to score kind of an average, you are meeting these particular criteria and these are the things you'll see. And then if you're a little bit above that and if you're excellent at it, this is what meets the criteria for that. The other thing that I hope that we would see for students particularly is that with the standards-based grading, if they're going off to university, they will get there and not be told, because of the standards and knowing whether they've met those standards or not, that this otherwise they thought in their own mind a student now is being told they need to go get remedial help because they don't know how to write a paper.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. An accurate reflection of their work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. And Start College Now used to be course options.
Yeah, so we're excited to have some students coming back to us with some interest in doing this. So those of you that have been around for a while, you know that there used to be course options and then statute changed. That was no longer the case. It's been a while since we've had students want to take advantage of the Start College Now. We kind of tease that our job in education is to prepare all students for all other careers. We're excited that this group of students are actually interested in some pre-education courses. And so the idea with Start College Now is that they can't be a duplicate of a course that we offer in school. So like somebody wanted to take like a pre-welding class. We offer a pre-welding class, so they couldn't go to technical college to take that. We don't offer any pre-education classes, and so they are headed off. So I'm personally excited that there's more people interested in going into education, and great that these students are going to capture some college credits while they're still in high school. But because this is under that old youth options, course options law, it still requires board approval.
And great grade points.
Yeah.
one of them's okay.
Well, yeah, one of them.
But they have to pay for the course if they don't pass the course.
Correct, and that is also a local policy that was not mandated. We had the option to do that, and we all agreed that if they're going to collect those credits, we will support it. But students that take those classes, and that certainly happened with course options, except course options, we had no legal way to require them to pay, so we're glad to see those differences.
And each of these students is taking all 3 of those classes? Is that?
I don't know that, Ms. Penza. Do you happen to know that? Or this came from Mrs. Seacard. I'm sorry, I shouldn't put you on the spot. You're just, all things come through. You usually
I am
know.
thinking that it's usually one class at a time.
Okay.
So they would be taking one of those classes and then they'll move on to the others.
And this is during their senior year, next year, next
Not
fall?
all our seniors. I think there's a junior in there as well. And so Start College Now is open to any grade level of student. So,
Okay.
So I'm now reading the paragraph.
Sorry.
And it's 3 classes that are asynchronous.
Oh.
So they have 16 weeks to complete those 3 classes. And they will get them all in 16 weeks.
Okay, and that, so all of them? Yeah. So, good.
Any more discussion? That's a great thing that they can get that before heading to college. Is there a motion to approve?
I so move.
Start College
I'll
Now?
second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried. You received your monthly expenditures?
Actually, we did not. So if you recall our technology instance, they are, we were unable to run our reports like we normally do. And so next month, we will have both months on there for you. We apologize for that, but I'll give you an update when we get to the district admin report, but we are not back up and running completely. We're really
On the agenda, because we hoped it would happen.
Yeah,
I
right.
think there were reports in there that we looked at.
But it wasn't the
regular.
They're just the monthly reports I usually do, but not
75
the
pages.
invoices and checks.
Okay, thank you. Do you want us to approve those that you said?
They don't need approval, we just
Okay.
do those for your information.
Okay.
The expenditures are the piece that need your approval.
Okay, does anyone have any questions then? Okay.
If we can get them, do you want to approve them at next week's meeting, or would you rather wait until next month and do both months together?
It's good for you guys. Whatever.
If you
I
get
don't know
them.
what you need.
Yeah.
We'll try, how about that?
Facility update.
So you saw both of the documents in your packets. It is exciting to drive by Forest Street. You just see so much of the building cropping up, right?
Yeah.
They're starting to close that in. Those new inside courtyard classrooms are going to be watertight by the end of this month, and so then we'll be pouring those slabs. The high school, those areas that you got to walk through a bit ago, they are now drywalling and stuff, and so they're starting to look like some real educational spaces, so it's exciting. They have second shift working regularly over at Forest Street, and they think that will need to continue throughout the summer because they are really significant days behind over there. The site is giving us a lot of challenges, and the utilities where they are took us a really, perhaps you drove by and saw there was a long time where the fence is here, and then the building is down here, and there was this great big, the ravine was dug, but you could still see the power connecting. The utilities took forever to who owned them and who was moving them and where did they go, and there was just an awful big delay there. And then when it kept raining, so that big thing kept filling with water, then they would have to pump it all out, and so lots of delays at Forest Street. The high school you don't see as much because you have to intentionally go back there to see it all, but that's all enclosed and they're moving forward.
What was the piece that Forest Street was waiting, like till November? Was that the generator or something big that I read? I was gonna go back and look at that. Is that what it is?
I saw something waiting till.
And I thought, wow,
Yeah.
don't they need that before November?
Only if our power fails.
That's all that it does? Okay.
Let's hope.
Okay, if that's all that it does.
We'll continue to monitor our facilities there. Any questions? Moving on to budget discussion.
All right, so none of this should be new information for you. We shared it with you a couple of months to give you a general idea. So we know that the board, we typically do the 2% salary and then our benefits goes on top of that. And there was very open discussion that the CPI came in quite a bit higher than that, and the board had asked us if there was any way we could balance the budget with a larger percentage increase than a 2%. And then along came WEA health insurance and a couple other pieces, and we are ready to make a recommendation to you. Bottom line would be a 3% salary increase. You've already approved the health insurance change, so that is significant. And we're going to talk about it now as I look at it. The defined contribution portion is already factored into this. And so I'm going to ask Jill to talk about that in a moment after I go through the rest of this checklist. And so, so we did a 3% salary increase. So just to be clear what you're looking at, the Fund 10 budget is that first column that you see, balanced. If 8% health insurance, that's where we were prior to our change. And then with the WEA changes, that next gold column down there, and then the Fund 10 balance, changing, including deductible.
Yep, the
Oh,
final
sorry.
two columns.
Yep, the final columns,
Yep.
the last two. So what that price of each line item is and what it does to our bottom line. The good news is at the bottom of line 11 in the far right corner, it's black, not a red number. So that implies that the rest of it is balanced. So let's talk about that. 3% salary increase, that is a total new cost of $378,325. Again, the directive from the board was see what we can do because we know that CPI at the time was 4.7. It is now, then it went to 5.9 for a month. It was at 7.1 for a month. We cannot play that catch-up game, not by a long shot. As a low-spending district, there's just simply no way that we would be able to do that. Plus, when it's in Fund 10, it's sustainable moving forward, right?
Are we competitive enough at 3% with places around us?
Both of our neighbors have approved a 4.7%
Yes,
increase.
exactly.
Both of our neighbors. I don't know anybody else. There's many, many, many districts, right? We always look at our wages, 4 years of experience, and each year we've looked at it. That's what brought us to our new compensation model, that we were competitive. Like La Crosse, they're always going to outpay us because they're massive, and they're also not a low spending district. So there's certainly no way we're going to keep up with that. But
you think we're competitive enough?
Well, we haven't seen everybody's new schedule, right? So people don't share that until it's done. So we just know that. Well, I know our salaries. So that's the other part that gets confusing, right? So we can look at somebody's salary schedule and we know that they offer health insurance. Our teachers pay 20% of their health insurance premium. Our salaries are higher than one of our neighbors, but their teachers don't pay any of their health insurance premium, right? So if you talk about it as a total benefit package, it muddies the waters a little bit, but it is tough to compare apples to apples, I guess.
Can I make one comment?
Yes, please.
I think the benefit of what we've been able to do is fund that 3% within our Fund 10 budget, so ongoing costs, right? We've been able to build that in. I don't know how they're funding 4.7% across the state. I think they're using ESSER funds in a lot of cases, and that's a funding cliff of one-time
The
money.
next year will be
Right.
probably.
And so they're going to be in a much more difficult situation either next year or the year after when, what do? They're going to have to lay off more and more people to be able to fund those increases for the rest. So that's the part that we don't always know. What's the 4.7% on? Is it their total salary or are they bargaining? And in the bargaining world, it's on base wages, which if you remember when we were doing that, that's the first column of BA0, and you get 4.7% of that of 30,000 or whatever is a lot different than of 60,000, right? So that's the other piece. Those are the two pieces that we don't know when people say 4.7, what's that mean? Of what is my question, and how are you paying for it? So.
And so our hope, because I very much remember bringing up the conversation with some of our support staff that perhaps if their compensation went up, we would lessen the turnover. So remember that whole defined contribution benefit, that is something that our support staff and support services have never had any kind of a retirement benefit. And so this is a 3-point salary and that potential retirement benefit. So we are hoping to talk about it as that package and us doing all that we can to, while living in our means, right? Because people would appreciate more salary now, but in 2 years when the ESSER funds are gone, they're going to be very sad and angry when we need to lay off an awful lot of people. So, all right, increase in deductible in funding. So we changed our deductible to a higher amount, and so we are going to pay for that out of our claims paid as incurred, out of that third pot of money that we currently do that with. And so because that exposure has increased, we calculated a 40% utilization rate, and that's how we came up with that money. We always calculate a new hire to retirement savings. So historically, when we hire a new teacher, they typically are much less expensive than a new teacher or a retiring teacher. That is not always the case anymore, as we get some very veteran staff members, and we're excited to have them bring all their expertise to us. But there's been a couple retirees that have already been filled at a savings to where they currently were. And so we estimated that to be about $135,000 savings. Building budget allocation, you've already approved that with a lower enrollment. That means less students to fund. The 4K reduction, we talked about this previously, that our current 4K is always kind of we don't know how many are going to come, but we know that this year we had an extra 4K teacher, and Wisconsin Virtual School was willing to third-party contract with us to take that full-time employee. They no longer have a need next year, and so that employee comes back to us, which means we have one more 4K teacher than we have a need for, so we are reducing that. First grade enrollment sizes are quite a bit down, and so using the 20 students per classroom that the board approved last year, we believe we can reduce 2 first grade sections and still not get class sizes over 20 students. Because of that same enrollment, we need to add a second grade classroom, so that is the add of 65,000. And so when you look at our elementary enrollment, sorry, on, off, as I'm looking down. If you look at our elementary enrollment, it is that bubble that keeps moving, right? And so we'll explain the seats on the bus and what our bottom line is in the end. Third grade also has lower enrollment next year, so that's a reduction there. Sixth grade, we had funded a 6th grade, 7th grade, and an 8th grade teacher out of our ESSER funds. There were larger class sizes there, and it allowed us, and Jordan spoke it beautifully tonight from the middle school, it allowed our middle school teachers to be content area specialists, that there was a reading teacher, a math teacher, a science, a social studies, as opposed to a teacher who has to do 2 sections of reading and 1 of science. And so then their PLCs could never meet with everybody, because am I going to my reading PLC or my science PLC? So I think Mr. Nortman would agree, as would Mr. Barth shared unsolicited, that our PLCs have really gained an awful lot of footing at the middle school because of that ad. But the incoming 6th grade enrollment is not high enough to warrant a 6th section of 6th grade. So that is ESSER funds. That's why you see no dollar amount attached to line number 9. Floating subs, we hired a few years ago. Instead of the daily subs that come in all the time, we hired a full-time teacher with benefits, and they report every single day, and every single day we have at least one opening that we assign them to do. And so that has been helpful to us. Because we needed to make some budget reductions, we are putting that temporarily into ESSER funds, and when our ESSER funds go away, we will reevaluate what has to happen with them. Due to caseload sizes at the high school, we are making a reduction of 1 special education teacher, and that was the final piece that put us into the black there. So when we look at all those reductions, a reduction of a 4K, 2 first grade, and a 3rd grade, and a 6th grade. The 6th grade really isn't part of, they were issued a 1-year contract under ESSER, so a little bit different. We have 4 people. There is no such thing as just a layoff anymore in education. It is a non-renewal. We know that there are some areas we have extreme teacher shortages, so we certainly don't want to non-renew. What ended up happening was we had a resignation at 3rd grade. And if I mess this up, I need help. I see Brandon nodding. We had a resignation at 3rd grade, and a 5th grade resignation and a 1st grade resignation. And so that meant there was just 1 of these reductions without a seat on the bus. There is also a middle school reading specialist position that is open that we have somebody interested in. And so we believe when all of the ads and takeaways are done, we have a seat on the bus for all of our staff members. We will not have to let anyone go for financial reasons. So they didn't all volunteer to move to a different seat. Mrs. Floyd had to designate someone as the person to move, but she did a great job evaluating skills and interests and all that stuff, and identified somebody that is going to move. So questions about all of those recommendations?
The last line, the special education. Is that because the enrollment's down for special education?
Yep, caseloads.
It's caseloads, it's a room, okay.
Correct.
I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yep.
We didn't shift that over to seats or anything like that, did we?
No.
Okay.
It is truly because the number of students in the high school with IEPs, when you look at the case loads, so not all special education students are created equal, right? So one teacher might have 10 kids who have higher needs, whereas another teacher can have 18 kids on their caseload, but their needs aren't as significant. And so Mrs. Tamke worked with Mrs. Penza and Mr. Madsen and the special ed staff, and they believe confidently that we can make that reduction. Again, not a layoff. We've got, you saw in the employment pieces, there are some special ed teachers who have resigned from the middle school. And so there's some shifting happening, that there's a spot for everybody, which feels fantastic. So now I have to uninvite any staff members. That feels fantastic.
Thank you.
Yes, any other questions? Jill, do you want to talk through the defined contribution piece?
Sure.
Excellent.
So we had talked with a committee of staff about this as well. So this was also brought up in a committee forum and got some feedback about that. So the benefit of going to a defined benefit from our defined contribution from our defined benefit plan, which we have now, which for our teachers, that's $35,000 basically after they retire. Doing a defined contribution allows us to use the time value of money, invest those funds for them each year that they're here, and perhaps create a greater benefit at a lesser cost to the district as well. We do have funds budgeted in Fund 10 and 27 right now for our annual amount that we send to our trust that we have for these other post-employment benefits. That's what OPEB is. So we already contribute to this trust. We've been doing that for a very long time, trying to fund that liability that we have for our staff. And as Dr. Severson said, our support services staff and our support staff do not have any kind of benefit like that besides the state retirement system. They don't have a district benefit for retirement. So what we can do is take that annual budgeted amount of $146,000, that's what it is right now, and we are able to easily fund the annual contribution at $800 per teacher each year, $500 per support services staff. Again, that's that group of supervisors. We have some school psychs in there. We have our tech team in there. So, and people in this office are in that group as well. And then active support staff would be $250. And again, they don't have anything right now. So this is something that would build over the years for them. So $131,000 expense, we have revenue already budgeted $146,000. So that's the easy part. We can start doing this next year for active people going forward and every year thereafter, because that's already built into the budget. The tricky part is the crossover, trying to transition from what we have to this plan. Right now in our OPEB trust, we have about $1.3 million. But our liabilities are much greater than that. So we looked at using a few pots of money of these one-time funds that we have. ESSER 2, about $50,000, and ESSER 3, $432,000. That would help us get to this funding mechanism to make this transition. But that's still not quite enough. So what I'd like to propose is for the next 3 years, taking some of those year-end funds that we typically have, right? We've set them aside for other projects, and in a lot of cases, we've never used them for those projects because revenues came in higher than expenditures. And that's where we get year-end funds from. If we don't spend them, they build our fund balance. We don't get state aid on that. They just sit in our fund balance to help with any future costs as well. We easily have over 1% to 2% each year in year-end funds. Just depends on the year, so I don't want to say every year it's like that, but typically we have about 1% to 2% easily in our year-end funds that we have bought buses, we've done extra projects with, things that one-time funds could be used for. This whole transition to this defined contribution plan is a great use of one-time funds, right? Because we're only going to do it one time. We don't have to keep doing that because we'll be on that new schedule. So about $162,000, $163,000 each of 3 years. That's less than 1% of our Fund 10 expenditure budget. So just to put that in perspective, right? 0.74% of our expenditure budget. The current retiree liability, so those people that have retired the last 5 years, we have $252,000 out there. So that includes 2022 retirees and those that have retired the last 4 or 5 years before that. We also have a potential retiree payout for the next, say if we say 10 years. So we want to capture a group that we don't want to just start doing this new benefit because it would be really difficult to afford. So we have to draw a line in the sand where we're going to say, these teachers who are age 55 and have the 20 years of service in the district and are within 10 years of retirement, we're going to keep funding the old way. So we have to set aside dollars to do that, to grandfather them in under the old plan, keep funding them the old way. And then there's a catch-up then that has to happen for all the other people that are less than that, have more years to retirement. So teachers with more than 10 years to retirement, they're not age 55 or 20 years of service yet either. That's about $378,000 of catch-up that we would need to do at that $800 per year for them. And then support services staff catch-up and support staff catch-up are listed there as well. And there's really not a catch-up because we never promised this benefit to them, but we felt that if we could find the funds to do it, it sure would be a nice benefit for them to have. So in all three of those cases, we would start with those closest to retirement and we would fund those catch-ups first because they're closer, they don't have as much time for those dollars to grow interest rates, and then we would keep working backwards to those staff that had been here less amount of time. We also decided in the bottom vesting schedule. So we'd look at it, a staff member would have to be here 10 years before they could take anything of this HRA that's sitting in an account for them. So they'd get 50% of it after 10 years. So we're trying to attract and retain them. And we feel like, in talking with our consultants, that if they've been here 10 years, they're likely going to stay longer than that because 10 years is a pretty good commitment to the district. 15 years, same kind of situation, 75% they could take with them. And 20 years and age 55, so retiring, they could take the whole 100%. And again, these funds would be put into an HRA for premium only for health insurance. It couldn't be used for anything else. That's what their sole purpose would be.
But each employee would start getting a statement with their name, their account, and their dollar amount each year as it grows. So that is nice that they can see that those dollars growing and know when I hit 10 years I can take 50% or stay 10 more. And
is there any restrictions on that they can use it for individual, single, or can it be a family too?
Either.
Yeah, just that it's premium.
It's got to be a premium for health insurance, yeah. So even when they become Medicare age, they could use it for any kind of Medicare premiums that they would have for drugs or the supplemental kind of stuff as well.
Okay. So then in your notes at the bottom, my understanding that like this year's retirees upon their retirement were transferring the $35,000 balance to an HRA. So they're effectively just getting their $35,000 transferred to an HRA at retirement rather than
the $7,000 a year for 5 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Before we did it over 5 years so that we could financially afford it.
Right.
Now that we're using that trust to do it, we will just give it to them and they can. Yep.
How is the benefit package valued? Like for usually you have like your salary and then your benefit package. How do you value that when it's all different for everybody? You wouldn't put a value on the benefits that way?
Are you talking for financial statements and things like that?
Yeah,
or are you talking just for employee
just for
knowledge?
Yeah, employee and just when people look at our school district and our benefit package, how would you value that as a group?
So we'll have a benefit guide, and it will be different for each group.
Okay.
And that's what we would do now, anyways.
So
and
just
like Dr. Severson, sorry, Shelley.
No, please.
She had mentioned that other kind of. This is a little bit more than 1%. If you look at the annual, it's not 1% for an individual, but another 1% on our budget for salary is about that $130,000. So, here is another 1%. It's just being divvied up differently. So, just wanted to make that note.
I was just going to reiterate the multiple exposures. So we believe it is sustainable because we already have that amount in our budget. Every year we already put that money in, except right now it's only benefiting teachers. So that budget amount is sustainable for the long haul. We had talked about could we use ESSER funds for some kind of one-time inflationary increase for staff. This is a way to use those one-time funds that benefits everybody and creates a new benefit for two of our staffing categories.
What I like about this is we're in a time where there's really no benefit for staff to stay in one position. Keep flip-flopping all over. This is a benefit to stay. I really like that. It gives them maybe some incentive to stay longer.
Another thing I liked about it was the flexibility of how and when we fund those catch-up funds. Like we get everybody on the right path, right? And then funding those catch-up funds. I would prefer it wouldn't take more than 3 years, right? But say there's a unique budget year. We don't know what the state budget's going to be in the next 2 years, so that, beyond the next year. So those next 2 years after that, this just kind of gives us that flexibility of how we're going to do that. Again, we put priority on teachers because they have that benefit already in the handbook. We'd fund those catch-ups for support services and support staff, on the lower tier for those that have lesser experience with us too, so.
And then I guess what you're saying is because it's kind of variable because depending on budget, it would just put us in a position where we may not be able to contribute in the next few years. Is my
The catch-up.
The catch-up is going to the catch-up with the ESSER funds. I get that part. So sustainable, you think, with all the support services, even if the budget has a difference, but I'm not sure what will happen. Like I said, but we won't be put in a position where we couldn't be contributing. Possibly, because
each year we make budget recommendations. So this year we started with that hole, and that's the admin team where we talk about how we're going to fill that hole. And so knowing how high of a value this benefit would have, things would be pretty dire before we came to the board and said, that thing we talked you into, we thought was a good idea a couple of years ago, we can't afford it anymore, right?
And that's what we're kind of saying with the defined benefits. So we're kind of saying we can't afford that anymore in a sense. We can, but it's not being spread out among everyone. We can't do the defined benefit. It doesn't. For everyone.
We believe we can spend the same amount of money and provide many more people with the benefit. Right. And when we looked at that, remember, so for a teacher to get a $35,000 benefit upon retirement, right now the district spends $35,000 on that. If we use the value of money over time, we would be spending, the conservative estimate was we would spend $22,000 for the teacher to get a $35,000 benefit. So again, our dollar amount is benefiting one group. We can use those same dollars to benefit two more employee groups.
That's what I was just trying to figure out,
So Jill, I have a question. You were mentioning if the budget from the state kind of messed things up, it wouldn't affect the amount from ESSER funds we're contributing, or would it, or are you just looking at the year-end funds?
Just talking about the year-end funds. Say revenues don't come in.
Right.
I typically budget pretty conservative, so revenues always come in a little bit more than what we expect
really
on purpose.
Yeah. So the amount that we would be looking at, should it not come in the way that you're kind of anticipating, there's a big difference between $430,000 a year and $160,000.
Yeah. And worst case scenario, it takes us 4 years, 5 years to do that catch up, right? And so then remembering that we put the money in the account, but if somebody leaves before that 10 years, all of that differs back into the pot that we use to fund it the next year. And even if someone leaves at 10 years, 50% of that comes back to the pot to be funded moving forward. So once it gets moving, it becomes a lot more self-sustaining as well because of the people who allow their funds to default back to the district.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up.
The last question I had is of ESSER 3 funds, how much is the $433,000 of that? I know it's a.
I want to say.
Do you have 50%? You don't know what percentage yet.
No, it's probably about. I think we have about 2.8 million in ESSER 3 funds alone.
Okay. I was just looking for so generalization that would be 20%.
20%, closer to that. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, if the board would like to pull the defined contribution piece out of the budget, you can, and take action separately, you can. We are presenting it to you as a balanced budget packet.
I appreciate all of the conversation that we've had leading up to this, so if anyone has any more questions or comments, what do you prefer, separate or together?
Well, I was going to say separate only because we don't know what other districts are doing as a whole. But we have one more month just to look at this part of it to say, well, we offered this, but there's this other contribution, is this enough or is this not enough?
I need more information about what other information we would have.
Basically,
So if another
to be
district spends
competitive.
more, we didn't get any more money off that.
No, agreed, but just in the perception perspective. I'm talking about a district that says, as far as every employee is going to look out for what's going to suit them. And so basically what I'm saying is, like you said, it may be they bargained a basic rate increase of 4.7%, but what about if we say, well, we got 3% across the board and we did this, or this is going to be different too in the future? I don't know. I'm not comfortable committing the ESSER funds, honestly, is what it is. Today. So I can take it out just so we can look at this from one more.
So just to be clear, the board has already approved a whole bunch of ESSER fund spending.
I know.
We've hired a lot of people through that.
Exactly.
Oh, just to be clear, Mike, if you don't want to spend any of those
So you're
funds.
saying you'd like to use it differently? Is that what you're
I
saying?
just want to look at all
Not
options.
use it for a plan like this? Okay.
I just want to consider all options, and only because ESSER 3 is the last round that we know of. I mean, as far as that's probably it. And so before it was a different scenario with ESSER 1 and 2. I just really want to be cautious with the ESSER funds, that's all.
So you asked about timing. Contracts have to go out by May 15th. And so I'm just going to be crystal clear. There have been years when we were negotiating or when we didn't know the state budget where staff got a contract this spring that said there will be a raise for next year, but we don't know it yet. And so then it had their same dollar amount. I felt like that was very damaging because then staff are like, are you kidding me? This is what I got last year. Now I got a contract with the same dollar amount. We very much would prefer to send out their new contract with their new dollar amount on it so that they could see it in real and actual figures for them. So May 15th is statutory language that they need those contracts.
Well, I'm not saying about the rest of the budget. I'm just talking about the contribution plan. That's all I'm talking about.
So if the
It
majority
depends
of
on
the
everybody's
board,
comfortable with it or not. I don't know if they're not. If they're more
We're doing it all
comfortable
at
with it.
once tonight, that's fine.
so somebody needs to make a motion and then you can
So
react
I
and
have-
see where it goes.
I just want to discuss
Just
it.
something to add. I think I'd like to vote on, I feel like the moving from a defined benefit to a defined contribution is a big change. And I feel like that needs to be voted on as its own entity and then vote on the budget approval as its,
So there are two single acts that we could,
yep.
okay?
So you make the motion, vote on them separately?
That is my suggestion and I just feel like that is a big change to change that benefit, and I kind of feel like it needs to be dealt with as its own action item as before, and then to do that and then vote on the budget, because I know that's.
Do you want to make a
budget.
motion to go with approving the defined contribution?
Yes, I can certainly do that. I would like to make a motion that we transition from a defined benefit to a defined contribution plan.
I would second that.
Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now let's move on to the recommended budget.
I move to approve the budget as Jill has presented to us.
Second.
Any more discussion or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Next will be the meeting minutes. Anything that you have any changes that you'd like to look at for that? Okay, is there a motion to approve? So second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Dr. Seifert, please report.
Okay, so you had asked me about all of our spring celebrations, and so wanted you to know that I put them in the notes for you. All kinds of great things happening, from the Lions Honor Banquet, Presidential Academic Excellence, May 11th. The spring banquet for all staff is the 11th up at the London Park. If the board would like to join the team of the DO and bus garage and maintenance and who else am I forgetting, Marty? Gebhardt? Yeah, we're all on one team, so if you'd like to join, I guess you could join another team if you wanted to, your choice, but many are ordering shirts, the Olympic theme. FFA banquet is May 13th, and then I found out the scholarship night, the senior scholarship night is May 25th, and so all of those things happening. So you asked, and there it is. Wanted to give you a little update on our technology. Still not able to publicly discuss all of the details, but I will tell you, this is the first time we've been face-to-face since that happened. I cannot say enough great things about Peggy Gordon, Ben Wolf, Travis Hendrickson. Honestly, the small IT staff that we have and the mountains that they moved is absolutely amazing. Every single day at 2 o'clock, we have a check-in with all of our partners, our insurance company and the third-party technicians, forensic specialists, electronics forensic specialists. They are still speaking in a language that Ben can understand far better than I. I try to learn a whole new vocabulary, but whew, that was a lot. I will tell you that so no money has exchanged hands. We do have insurance for this whole process. One of our concerns is that they're going to come out with this huge list of recommendations to secure our network moving forward. We had some very, very, very quality processes in place for our backups, and they are saving the day. And so there are districts who had the same experience that still today would not have any of their documents back. We are down to all of our drivers being back except our local files, where those financial things are sitting. So all of the files on our shares drive, our personal drives, all of that stuff is called the Nestle Crunch, if you care. She names everything after candy. So the Nestle Crunch drive is the one that we're still waiting on. Just today they were given the go-ahead to start rolling back to that. And so we will lose probably last week Wednesday, or the previous week Wednesday, we'll lose 1 day of entry into our systems, but otherwise back up and running. It's really pretty amazing. And so we had great partners. Our insurance will help pay for the expenses along the way, but all those recommendations at the end could be a big piece, but we will wait and see. Through all of the discussions, nobody has said to us, well, why on earth do you do it that way? There was just never a time when they were just like, that doesn't even make any sense to me. There was a lot of conversation, and our tech crew has just spent countless hours here, and so appreciative. They all care so very, very deeply. They take it as a personal affront when people can't get in and use the technology the way it's intended. And I think this weekend they all got a little bit of sleep, so that was very, very, very good for them. So we expect to make a full recovery, but still unknown. So just wanted to update you on that. One other topic that has been brought up to me, so our logo, if you recall, in 2015, those tiger eyes, that became a whole community conversation as to what our new logo should be. We allowed students, community members, anybody that wanted to could submit choices. We put in the Tiger Tribune, here's all the logo choices, and we did a survey, and we got hundreds of people that voted for it. This was the logo that was voted for. We chose not to trademark it at any point because we kind of felt like if people are showing their tiger pride, we want to encourage people to show their tiger pride. And so like the bank has called and asked if they could sell checks with our logo on. Heck yeah, the PTO has asked, can we make whatever those brown things are called on the back of your phones, can we put your logo on those? We're like, heck yeah, right? All of our teams, we asked them to use that logo. This fall, when our logo was used on several political signs, somebody said, how can they do that? And I said, because it's not trademarked. So somebody asked me, does the district want to consider trademarking our logo? The idea would be, what if our logo, not trademarked, is put on things that absolutely doesn't represent what the district believes in or what the district does? So I have not done a lot of digging into what that process would look like. I just said that I would share that with the board and get your feedback as to what your thoughts are.
I had quite a few calls about that, and people were upset that that tiger logo was on political signs. So I have an interest in trademarking, but you want people to be able to use it.
And so I think when it's trademarked, you can still give people permission to use it. They just have to tell you what for.
I mean, otherwise, if we don't have the tiger logo, I mean, if they want to recall school board members, they can put the tiger logo sign on it, you know? That isn't saying that we support it, but the public perceives it that way. So I have an interest in that. And the people that contacted me were very upset about it.
Well, trademark laws, I don't know a lot about it, but I know you are forced to protect it if you want to maintain it. That's any standard trademark that is. And that's where litigation gets involved, or at least threatening letters to threaten to litigate. And that's where how far does the district want to go with that when they try to protect a trademark? That's a difficulty too. And also then, of course, trademark law, the last part is, if it's a universal enough logo, it's not trademarkable. it has to be distinct in some way. I guess I'm no lawyer, but I know that.
You've checked into trademarks, I'm guessing.
For other products, yeah.
Okay.
From another work job, yeah. So basically, that was the biggest thing is when you trademark something, you have to really be on top of it because someone can prove against you that says you didn't protect it. There's like 3 other people over here used it, and you didn't say anything, and now you didn't really want it. So that's all. I'm not saying it's a negative or positive thing in this case. I'm just saying it could be another liability out there for legal fees. That's all.
And it was something that was out there, right? And we just kind of chose that one. We didn't necessarily design that, did we?
We found something similar, not exactly that, and I brought it to the graphic designers at the print shop and asked them to make some adjustments to it. So we did not just grab it and take it from somebody else. We found a couple samples and put it together roughly, and then when that one was voted on, then we asked her to polish it up a little bit, and so it is, I think it's ours. We just haven't,
it's
we
unique, but not original.
Yeah.
Can you explore that for us to
I
see
sure
what
can.
it would?
I sure can. See.
I'm interested in that.
More information on that.
Anybody else?
Right. Okay, anything else?
That is it for my.
We'll move on to WASB and other. Let's see.
So the CISA annual meeting delegate needs to happen?
Yeah, so I'll just report out on things happening at CISA. Are you guys getting my forwards?
Yes.
Okay, good. And CISA has chosen a new administrator that will be starting in the summer, and that will be Mr. Paul Fisher. He's accepted the position, and Dr. Arneson will be retiring. And tomorrow night we have at CISA the new board member gathering for our 26 districts that are part of that. And anybody who hasn't been to a new member gathering training is welcome to attend. It's not just for the newly elected. So, and you don't have to register. Come to the CISA office in West Salem at 7 o'clock, it'll be from 7 to 9 tomorrow. And I will be doing, as the Region 6 director, I'll be part of that, as well as a WASB attorney will be presenting. And then there'll be district administrators there, as well as all the board members from all over. So please feel free to come to that if you want to. Okay, and then we move on to the CISA annual meeting. Every year, the CISA has an annual meeting, and Jackson County has 2 delegates. And so between Melrose, Elma Center, and Blackwood Falls, we have 2 people representing. However, at the annual meeting, every school has a representative that comes to vote on those delegates. And I have been represented as one of the Jackson County delegates for a while, and my term is up for election this year, and I would like to continue with that for another term. We so desire but all of Jackson County will be voting.
And that doesn't mean that someone else couldn't be your annual meeting delegate, just so
Yes.
everyone is clear.
Yeah.
Someone else could
Yeah.
serve that role, and you would still be there as the
So
CISA
what
board
that
rep.
means, you know, anybody could come from our board as a representative of our board to just hear the report of the annual CISA report. And then I will also be in attendance because I'm a present board member, a board of control, they call us, not board of members.
So we could use you as our CISA annual meeting.
Yeah, or someone else.
If someone else doesn't want to go.
If someone else is interested in just the going on as a CISA and what the annual reports will be.
I'd be interested, but being a delegate kind of scares me.
You can do it, Tom.
I can't understand why.
I do not attend that meeting. I will be not providing any services.
Yeah, I can represent our district as well as be the Jackson County person, one of the Jackson County people as well. I've done that in the past, or someone else can come with you.
Sorry.
When was that? Is it the
June 1st.
June 1st.
It's a Wednesday. The first Wednesday of the month is always CISA.
So you would like to be nominated, Tom?
Would like to vote?
Do we need to do it right now?
Yes.
Yes, they need to know who's their representative.
Wednesday.
No.
Otherwise, I could do both our district as well as one of the Jackson County.
Well, and I'm sure you represent us well, but
Well, thank you.
I like to get my feet wet and do some different things, so.
I nominate Tom Ellis.
Yes.
I'll second.
Stand by.
No, I'm not the alternate this time.
And have you accepted that, Tom? Okay. Okay, all in favor of Tom Epps being our representative at the CISA annual meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Tom and I will be going. Thank you. Under the conference workshop attendance, we did not report on this. Tom left early last time, but he and I did attend the school law conference in Wisconsin Dells in February, I believe it was. Trying to think. It was, but we have the folders from all of the tracks with all of the handouts and everything that if anyone's interested in what that agenda was, it was a very full day with
Very informational.
yeah.
Absolutely
And
wonderful.
the school attorneys met the day before, and then were also part of our meeting, training day, so that it was very helpful. So, but I have folders of both the tracks, and we got that out of it. For the updates.
This isn't a conference or workshop, but for community connections with schools. I did kind of an interesting thing I've never done before. I worked at the Soul Ensemble.
Oh, thank you for doing that.
I saw that on Facebook that they needed people, and that was really interesting. It was middle school and high school, and like Rue was there, and Toma and Sparta, and it was very interesting. I was a room monitor. So
Oh, I thought maybe you were a judge.
I was a judge. I could have done. I was a music
You
theater.
have to pass a test for that, Tom, to be a judge.
Yeah, but it was interesting.
I'm not saying
It
you
was-
couldn't, but.
It was fun to see kids participate at that level. It was good.
Awesome. Anything else on attendance? Any school board? You probably have lots to report.
I didn't,
Zach,
no, I
just so you
really
know.
haven't.
Okay.
I know Andy is looking for help for the track meet, and I can't be back in town until like 5:30 that night, so.
Let's hope Mother Nature settles down a little bit so we can host it,
Well, I
right?
didn't want to send any snarky emails back to him, but
Yeah, he's struggling this spring. His first spring as AD is really.
have we run an athletic event? in spring
Yeah,
sports?
we have. Not many, but we have a few.
Okay, we're at future agenda items. We have the gender support plan committee going on. Anything else?
Trademark research.
Trademark, yeah. Anything else?
Has there been any movement on the employer roundtable?
Yep, for sure.
May 2nd is going to be an advisory group, and then
Okay.
May 16th is the full, bigger group. So we're going to pick up where we left off and refresh everybody's memory where we're at and see what other pieces need to be done for that May 2nd meeting. And then we'll develop the agenda for the May 16th, which is a Monday,
With the
11:30 to
advisory
1.
committee, right?
Yeah. That's the bigger group, so.
Anything else? I move that the board adjourn to closed session per Wisconsin State Statute 19.85 and 1 F for the purpose of discussing the financial, medical, social, or personal histories of or disciplinary data of specific persons. Is there a second?
Second.
And Marty, will you do roll call for that?
Tom Epps?
Here.
Yes.
Yes.
or no?
Amy Hoffman?
Yes.
Troy Webb?
Yes.
Ann Deemer?
Yes.
Mary Jo Radcliffe?
Yes.
Mary Jo Rosmanowski?
Yes.
Brad Dobbs?
Yes.
We'll take a 10-minute break and then come back. We're in closed session.